bolus, which is a term that you know very well, very well, John, because in the medical establishment, in the hospital, when you deliver a drug in a concentrated fashion to the brain to do a contrast agent to the brain to do a brain scan, for example, or a drug to the heart or to the liver, you actually inject it with varying speeds of bolus, a high concentration dose of hard drugs or others, so that they are delivered in a concentrated fashion. So we know that systematically, when you inject a vaccine, especially those COVID vaccines, you are going to deliver somewhere into the body a concentrated dose of that vaccine. And that's a big problem. That's a very big problem because remember, John, I don't know if we had spoken about that last time, but these technologies emerge from anti-cancer vaccines, right? Uh, what does anti-cancer vaccines do? They're intended not to trigger antibodies, but to trigger T cells that are attacking tumors. So any one of these the transfected cells are the cells that would have uptaken uh, a dose of vaccine, a particle of vaccine, will eventually get destroyed by the immune system. And if that's concentrated, okay, if that's concentrated, that's a real problem because it's going to cause a challenge to the environment that it's hitting. We've never evolved for large swaths of our linings, the linings of our blood vessels, to be destroyed by our immune system. Right? That's what we're seeing with white blood syndrome, for example. You've been discussing it this year. We've never evolved for that, and it triggers a number of imbalances, which align very much with all of the adverse events that we've seen.
And there's two things. Obviously, we want to aspirate. Incredibly, national guidelines tell nurses and doctors not to aspirate. It's just unbelievable. We should be aspirating all injections. And as you pointed out, Mark, it's how quick you inject it. So if you inject something really quite slowly, then you're going to get relatively low pressure. If you inject it quickly, then you're going to get high pressure. It's going to go everywhere. And if we inject it quickly, we're going to destroy the walls of these delicate blood vessels, as you say, capillaries, arterioles, ventricles, very delicate walls. And that means that the fluid that we've injected is in this interstitial space is going to go into the blood vessels. And you've actually calculated with Pfizer and Moderna, I believe, how big an area that this depot, this bolus that's being given, will occupy in the muscle.
Yes, it's an expansion sphere in a way, with the needle's tip at the center. And it's about 0.8 centimeters for Pfizer and about 1.1, if I recall, for Moderna, because they have a larger dose, there's 0.5 millimeters for Pfizer. So within that area, you're at risk. Now, what's important after that to understand is that there's also a preconceived idea that it's okay, even if it's a small part of the dose. Right? And remember, Pfizer, at least that's what they said originally, had said that their vaccine was 10 billion nanoparticles, and Moderna said 40 billion. Now, I had calculated that a coin size aneurysm in the aorta is about 60,000 cells. Okay, so 60,000 nanoparticles hitting your aorta in a concentrated fashion during that first minute. Okay, because what I'm talking about is this bolus has a very short window of opportunity between the moment it's inactive because it's coated and the moment it's disseminated and completely fragmented and diluted. There's a short window during which it can actually be very dangerous. And just so you understand, that little coin-sized aneurysm that will eventually, 4 or 5 months later, um, crack and open up, and you will have dissection of your aorta, and you will die. Um, this is 0.0006% of the Pfizer vaccine. It's a tiny share of it, and therefore, and I'm not even talking about a stroke in the brain, or my best friend who had a leak, an arterial leak. He had his leak almost killed him, and it was 1 millimeter uh, wide, 1 square millimeter, and within 10 days he was dying.
What?
Because he was losing his blood.
Yeah, internal bleeding.
And that's 1 millimeter is 750
Good boy, mister.
endothelial cells. It's nothing. Therefore, this is very important, and I think we're going to have to contemplate is completely overhauling the delivery mechanisms of vaccines.
Yeah.
And potentially of other drugs that are causing similar
Side effects. Yeah.
Of course, this is the way I've been taught to give medicines all my life. I learned to do intramuscular injections when I was 18, and you put it in, you take care to aspirate while stabilizing the needle, and then you inject it relatively slowly. And yet, for some reason, the World Health Organization changed these guidelines. It's just bizarre that the World Health Organization would change safe, tried and tested guidelines for what I consider to be unsafe practice.
It's obviously unsafe, that's certain. And it's the fact that we've added that, the fact that we've added so many new shots, by my calculation, because even with aspiration, for example, if you take the bodybuilders, have a tremendous experience with that, and they have a feedback loop that's immediate called Trenkov. When the steroids they inject themselves get to the lungs, they start coughing and because they collapse.
Oh, fuck.
So they have feedback. They know that even with aspiration and injecting slowly, there's a minimum of 2%. I believe that about 5% of injections are dangerous.
Wow.
And therefore, when you do the math, when you start, I have in the book, I don't know if you can show, but fundamentally,
Yeah, let's
the
all
more
for the greater
you
good until I
vaccinate,
have a see
the less
you.
chance of staying healthy you are. There's a point to which the entire population, and notably the young, because they've been vaccinated much more than we have, much more. And so when you do the simulation, for example, in the book, I have a simulation of the entire U.S. population. I did that really back of the envelope, but I end up with about 55 million people with clinical injuries and about 190 million people with injury harmed by the vaccine. Right, and when you look at the ballpark figure, it's very consistent with the high level of disabled in the U.S. I think there's 64 million people who are disabled in the U.S. out of a population of 340 million. And one of my messages in the book at the end is to say, look, we need to wake up. We need to awaken. My conclusion is awaken people. We need to awaken to this, because if we continue with that, then everybody's going to be sick, and we're going to be in a civilization where you're going to have more people sick than actually healthy. And for something as trivial as a poorly designed or flawed delivery protocol that's repeated billions of times. I've come from the automotive industry. In the automotive industry, you know that if you have a problem on your car and you repeat and you sell 100 million cars, it's going to come back to haunt you. This is much worse than that. It is literally the biggest industrial accidents and the biggest health medical catastrophe in the history of the world.
But I mean, someone like me or any we'll probably spend about a day on it, and then they could go and train everyone else, and yet we're still, the vast majority of the world is carrying out this procedure wrongless. It's just absolutely incredible. And I just want to give some evidence. I know you've got a lot of evidence, Mark, but I've talked to, I've obviously given a lot of intravenous therapy in my life, and some drugs, for example, methyl prednisolone, you give it, and the patients often get a metallic taste in them. Just to take away. Or I give some intravenous vitamins that they can take the vitamin B in there now within a few seconds.
Yeah.
And I've talked to quite a lot of people now who've had vaccine injury, definite clinically diagnosed injury, and several of those have confirmed to me that they got an odd taste in the mouth within seconds.
Huh.
Yes, it's one of the
My
points I made in
sister's
the
looking
book.
as well. Idiot.
Evidently, the
What
bones can
is
go
your
all sorts of
problem?
places. It doesn't necessarily every time goes to the mouth. Okay?
Yeah.
But it does occasionally, and it is a very, very clear sign of accidental intravenous injection.
And I think if it goes to your finger, you might not notice it. The fact it's in your mouth and you have the sensation means you've got something to.
There are other signs, John. There's other signs of that. One study that many people have talked about, which is by Juncker et al. At Stanford. There was a small detail in there that showed that the T cells, the CD4s that were actually working, were expressing a marker called PDL1 or PD1, and that marker is a marker of exhaustion. And the vaccinated people who were healthy did not have that problem. What does that mean? It means that the immune cells had to destroy a significantly higher number of transfected cells. And that, again, can only happen with a bolus, which is much more effective at transfection.
Of course, these CD4 cells are the T helper lymphocytes that stimulate the whole immune activity. Just tell us what you mean by transfection, please.
Okay, transfection is the fact of bringing an antigen or a foreign element inside a healthy cell, right? So you have infection is a virus. A virus penetrates the cell, is going to infect it. And when you do that, when humans do that, or when pharma does that, or lab researchers do that, they force an antigen inside cells. Now, one of the important points that I make in the book, and that's why I've been very alarmed, is the fact that many people have been saying, well, that's related only to mRNA. And that's not correct. The reality of it is that most vaccine technologies, apart from protein vaccines, and they also can have issues, but in a much lesser extent. But attenuated vaccines, even inactivated virus vaccines, virus-like vaccines, like HPV vaccines, for example, can actually do exactly the same thing. And in the book, I actually spent 2 or 3 weeks actually doing a deep dive in all the case reports of the past 50 years. And there's a table in which I show that every single vaccine is having the same types of adverse events, right? So and remember, there are vaccines that have a different target, a different technology. So it's like you push here and you push here, but everything's come back here. Okay, something is not what it doesn't make sense, and that's because it's our immune system that's reacting exactly the same way for this target or this other target, and it's because there is this delivery problem.
I think you just answered my next question, really, Mark. I was going to ask why you believe that the bolus theory is the main cause of adverse events. But I think you've done that because we're using all sorts of different chemical preparations.
Will you drink some water?
Rather than being the interaction of those individual chemicals and those drug preparations, it's the large amount of any foreign material, because there's very often common side effects from a range of different vaccines. Is that kind of your thinking?
Well, it's part of it. Yes, you're right, John. It's part of it. But it took me, to tell you the truth. I have been, looking at all the hypotheses, as anybody who does root cause analysis should do. So I have these whiteboards. I have two here. I have these huge whiteboards where I put all the hypotheses. I did the observation, and we can go to the observation later. I did a number of observations, and then I put the all of the hypotheses and tested. And I've been testing mine and some of my colleagues who have been stating facts, different theories.
What?
And for the past 2.5 years or 3 years, I've been saying I don't understand. My theory looks like it's the only one that stands. And everybody was very annoyed by it. I understand that. And was saying, but it can't be. Right, which is not a scientific argument. It's more. It's
Oh,
so
it's
complex.
snowing.
Basically, it's so complex. It's going in so
Yes,
many
sir.
places. It has so many different ways to materialize that it's
Yep.
not possible. And
It's
at
hailing.
the time, I didn't have an answer.
Hail.
I said, I don't know, but it sure looks like it because I can
What?
explain everything. And by the way, a large part of my theory, there's two aspects, two parts of the theory. We can go to it later. But a big part of it is completely demonstrated and tested and reproducible on animals, etc. There's no discussion about that. And here's the reason why my theory is the only one that stands. It's not because I'm smart or anything. It's just fundamentally because there's only one way you can actually bypass nature. And it took me a little while to understand. Nature and evolution, whichever, or God, whichever, I'll let our audience choose.
We certainly have this wonderful body that we can't.
We have a wonderful body. We have a wonderful body which has been optimized by thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years of evolution. And we've been in an environment that's safe less than 100 years. Okay, let's remember, we ate poor nutrients. We ate in nature poison, etc. So we had to evolve. And when I've written a few articles. I don't go into details of it in the book, but we have multiple layers of protections to mitigate, to filter, to manage poison. Okay, and we've known since Mitujatis, that was I don't know, 500 years before Christ, I think, something like that. We've known that we can intake poison in small dose.
Yeah.
Right. So why is that? Because first of all, when we ingest something or when we breathe something, we don't take a whole dose like a bolus.
Okay? You can overdose on water.
It goes in progressively. It's spread out across the intestine. It's spread out across the lungs or the mouth. It's in when it penetrates the bloodstream. People don't realize that most of the bloodstream is actually storage. The lumen, which is the inside of the blood vessel, is not touching anything. It's not touching the tissue. It's not touching the sides. At any given time, 99% of the blood is not in contact with. So it's a mitigation strategy so that 99% of the blood goes to the liver, the spleen, the kidneys for filtration. And if ever there's too much poison, then it can't all be filtered. Then it actually gets disseminated across the body. It's going to do a little harm here, a little harm there, but it's impossible that it's going to do much harm because what each ecosystem locally will be able to deal. So you'll kill. Let's say you have a bit of poison, just a molecule of poison that can kill one cell. It's going to kill that cell. The ecosystem behind is going to replace that cell, and then the outcome of that cell that's been destroyed with the poison is going to be taken care of by the immune system. It's a sort of a bulletproof vest effect, if you will. You take
when you cut yourself, it's going to the infection is going to drain into the lymphatics, and you've got that whole lymphatic there effect as well. But
exactly. I mean, there's multiple layers of protection. what the accidental IV does is bypass it.
Yeah, that needle can bypass all of those natural.
During at least during the first 30 to 50 seconds.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's going to go through your heart in a high concentrated way. It's going to go through your lungs in a high concentrated way. It's going to go to your organs, to your capillaries in a concentrated way.
That's a great
And,
word.
then after that, it's
Sir,
luck.
full of very
It's
good words.
how big the bolus is, where it hits. In some cases, it's going to destroy part of the organ, and the organ is going to be able to reconstitute because of stem cells and regenerate. But in many cases, that's not a possibility, either because the damage is too big or because there's little stem cells in those areas, like the heart, like the brain. So that's fundamentally the reason why the bolus theory is likely the only one, because there's so many ways you can bypass the body. After that, there are different ways you can harm. Okay, and we can go through that if you're interested. There's different mechanisms. One big chunk of the theory is disbalance in the cardiovascular system.
Okay.
Basically, the damage is so big
Yeah.
and so widespread that you no longer have the body doesn't know where to throw the healing, right? So you're going to have too much demand for coagulation, and you're going to have thrombosis, or you're going to have a stroke, or you're going to have too much demand for growth, or for example, blood vessel creation, and you're going to have fistulas and angiomas because you have too much of that demand going to just one place, being monopolized to a certain extent. Or some of the repair is going to be monopolized somewhere else, and some areas are not going to be repaired, and you're going to have calcification, and you're going to have arteriosclerosis, for example. Arteriosclerosis is certainly not cholesterol. Okay, arteriosclerosis, when you read the data and you do the time, I have a whole chapter on that in the book, is really the fact that you've damaged the endothelium in a significant portion. The fibrin has been dissolved, because it's supposed to be dissolved after a certain point of time by the plasmin that's generated by the plasmin activators that's generated by the endothelium, and basically then you have calcification that occurs, and you're not supposed to have calcium, and therefore it's going to become a trap. It's going to trap cholesterol, it's going to trap metabolic waste, it's going to trap all sorts of things, and that explains why more than 50% of Americans, adult Americans, actually have arteriosclerosis. Arteriosclerosis is something very difficult to do, because you need to damage in a very, very large area of the linings, and that doesn't happen naturally.
It's basically the inflammatory process, isn't it? Whatever.
Yes, there is another big part of my discovery. One big discovery is microperforation of the vascular system. I don't know if it's my discovery, but actually I conceptualized it as a problem. If you see, you know that what you can be certain of, in science, you can have uncertainties, but you need to have some periods. One thing you know is that this bolus is going to basically be fragmented and be filtered and be disseminated across. So a big part of, and the body does that marvelously well with oxygen and everything. That's how we stay alive. If you do, that means that a lot of the bolus is going to be hit in a fragmented way. It's going to hit like little clusters. And clearly there is, again in the book I demonstrate that there's a whole literature that talks about vascular leakage or capillary permeability. Actually, myocarditis and pericarditis is nothing else. It is holes in the capillaries, in the blood-heart barrier, okay, or in the blood myocyte barrier, which whatever it's called, it's holes there, and therefore it lets in elements that are inflammatory. Okay. Now you take this problem in myocarditis, and if these holes remain over time, then you're going to have constantly inflammation, and at one point that can become degenerative. Okay, that's what's happening in the blood-brain barrier with Alzheimer's, Parkinson. It's also where you don't necessarily feel it because the brain doesn't have pain, but it's exactly the same process for all the neurodegenerative disease. Neuropathies is exactly that. If you have a nerve, and in the capillaries of the nerves you have microperforations, you're going to have metabolic waste. You're going to have elements that are not supposed to get in, and you're going to have
very interesting
immune cells that are going to be active and create inflammation, and you're going to have a lot of pain and a lot of inflammation. And that's, by the way, that's the reason why people who fast manage very quickly to get down that inflammation. Why? Because there's less junk, or there's less metabolic waste in the blood, and the immune system is going to have less elements, less metabolic waste to take out of those areas that are not supposed to.
And less components to stimulate inflammatory processes.
Exactly. Endometriosis is exactly the same thing. What is endometriosis? It's you have cells that behave like cells in the uterus, but are not necessarily in the uterus. And why is that? Well, because the estrogens that they're getting premenstrual cycles is stimulating them when it's, and therefore when you stop it, they behave like and it's extremely painful. So you see this, and you can push the same problem of microperforation to the testis, the male testis, where
I think about it. That's actually when my periods started getting so painful and like unbearable.
It happens, right? It goes to the testis. Well, the sperm, the male sperm, is not supposed to be in contact with your immune system. If it is expressing elements that we don't typically express, and therefore the immune system is going to kill them. And that explains also why you would have sperm count that dropped. There was this study that was done in Israel post-vaccination where we saw a drop in, I think, 40% of the sperm count, and that explains it very well. And I could go on. I mean, I think leaky gut is exactly that. It's microperforation of the gut-blood barrier. You have elements that are not yet digested, like gluten, for example, that we're not supposed to be in contact with the blood, that are inflammatory, and therefore you have an inflammation, and it explains all the bowel inflammatory disorders.
Did you just unpick a little bit, Mark, how this microperforation is caused?
The endothelium in across the body plays a fundamental role in the organs, and in the systems also. It's also true in the nervous system. So it plays a role of blood tissue barrier. Okay, so in the capillaries, so it basically is just a one layer, just a tiny layer in the capillary. That's all there's left. Okay. If you destroy it and you don't repair it, you've gotten rid of basically the function of filtering what's coming in and filtering what's coming out.
Okay.
So, for example, if you hit an endocrine gland, the adrenal gland, for example.
So if bolus is going happens, bolus of this material happens to be going through the endocrine gland, causes transfection. That leads to inflammatory destruction of some of the vascular endothelium.
Yes, the T cells will destroy all the cells that have been infected or transfected. Sorry, and it'll leave a hole. That's a physical hole. Okay, it's a physical hole. It's gone. So anything that was filtering, notably hormones,
No.
will leak out.
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, microperforation explains, and I have a whole table, all the endocrine disorders where you have hypersecretion. Because there's no, and I have this, I was telling you when we discussed earlier this morning, when you called me, about the case of two young men or young boys who were 14 and 16 who died in 2022, I think, or 2022, 3 days and 4 days after their vaccination. And the autopsy showed that their hearts had contraction bands. So basically, the heart had contracted so much that they had died. And they didn't have myocarditis. They didn't have any T cell attacks to the heart. And when I looked, in the literature, what could cause that, I found that a high dose of epinephrine would do that.
Or adrenaline is the same.
Or adrenaline, yeah. In the US, it's epinephrine. In Europe, it's adrenaline. But fundamentally, so you can imagine, you have the adrenal gland, you have adrenaline stored, right? And constantly there, our bodies deal with adrenaline. Now you open up those gates, and you've got, I don't remember the quantity, but the quantity was like the equivalent of a high dose. And that went to the heart directly and killed those kids. I'm making an informed, let's say, informed hypotheses, but it makes a lot of sense. There's a study that showed clearly microperforation of the heart. It was a Japanese study. There is also a study actually by Nakahara, a Japanese study, that shows that every single heart, everyone, has been microperforated to a degree or another. Everybody, which also basically builds my theory that everybody gets fit. That was also the case with a study by Berger and all with Professor Munger in Basel University Hospital. They showed that too. So this is really what's happening, and what's interesting about it is once you know what happens, once you understand that, you can start thinking of ways to cure that, right? And I was telling you about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is authorized by the FDA, notably to repair after to revascularize after cancer treatments, after radiotherapy. But it also
when you go scuba diving, you go too low too fast,
become deaf or blind,
or altitude, you go too high too
fast. It's not something that I made up. There is considerable literature that shows that it actually repairs the endothelium, because it's actually triggering it's called hyperoxia, the excess of oxygen triggers stem cells to replicate, and the stem cells go on and repair. They are repairmen. They spend their days repairing our bodies. And I want to say one of the beautiful things that happened, or stories that I read in those 4 years of reading pretty sad stuff, is the story of microchimerism. I don't know if you know about that. The fact that fetuses repair their pregnant mom, with their stem cells that circulate. So it's proven that women who've had children have less Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Really?
Which literally means that stem cells can repair the endothelium, because Alzheimer's, Parkinson, Huntington, all these neurodegenerative diseases are proven to be related to this microperforation of the blood-brain barrier. That's now accepted by the scientific community.
It's a beautiful idea that the baby stem cells, the fetal stem cells, would synergize with the mother and result in cause healing in the mother.
And it's not an idea; it's a fact. There are researchers that found they found Y chromosomes in the mother's brains. So indeed, it could have been an X. I'm not saying that only boys repair their mother. I'm trying to say it was just much more simple to test.
Yeah, you wouldn't notice the Y chromosome in my brain. There's probably quite a few there already. And in most men's brains, I have this judging from their behaviour. Now, I think the bolus theory also explains why some people seem to have harm and some people don't have to have harm after the COVID vaccines. This harmed, not harmed dichotomy. Do you think that explains that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You have people who get a bigger dose or a large, and they get harmed in such a way that the body cannot heal, or it takes time to heal, and that's the dichotomy. Everybody gets hit. Okay, let's be clear. As I said, Nakahara has shown that. There's several studies that are showing that everybody's getting a little bolus.
Yep.
Okay. Which makes sense.
I'm not getting any more mRNA vaccines, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not getting either, but
I'm not getting one.
But what's clear is there are some people who get a dose for which the body.
Why can you put fucking mystery drugs in my body and I can't put drugs that I actually know what the drug is in my body?
There is another way you can damage. Okay, so that's basically the cardiovascular system. One other protection that our bodies have is a genetic bunker. I call it genetic bunker. It's basically protecting our stem cells. Why do you need to protect our stem cells? Well, because if our stem cells are there to repair, regeneration, to create red blood cells, billions of them every day, and to create white blood cells, which are immune cells, which are both also extremely important to life, billions of them every day. So if you do not want to harm those, and you don't want to insert anything in those, because we know from normal cells that the only way the body has to get rid of a poison or to get rid of a virus is to commit suicide, right? If evolution had found a way, we would not do that. It's an extremely resource intensive way to do that. So that means that stem cells haven't the solution either. If they had, they would have passed it on by evolution. Every single cell in our body has evolved from a stem cell.
Well, they passed it on by simple mitosis.
Exactly. It would have been. So that means that stem cells should never be contaminated. And that explains where they're located and the way they fuel themselves. They are located in the bone marrow. So it's not very easily accessible to bacteria, to parasites, or to anything.
Like you say, it's a physiological bunker where they can hide away.
Exactly. It's a physiological bunker. It's also disseminated. It's distributed, so you have several areas. So it's extremely well protected. And it's also in endothelial niches. So in the endothelial, it's hidden away behind. And because of that, it cannot feed on oxygen. It needs to feed on sugar, the famous glucolysis. And the only way where that could occur again is either being very unlucky with a vaccine. Okay, for a vaccine particle that is properly injected, that go through the lymphatic system, the lymphatic node that gets distributed to the inside back to the bloodstream, it's going to be
incredibly unlikely.
very unlikely. And because we've evolved for that, because it needs to be extremely unlikely that a virus that's contained in us actually reaches them. Otherwise, we'd have problems. So, but the bolus changes that again, because indeed it's unlikely that if there's one little stem cells on this wall, if I throw a dart that I will get it, I'll have one chance in a million of hitting it. But if I throw thousands or millions of them of darts, I will have a bigger chance of hitting it. And that's what we're seeing. And that means that we have a problem, because when that occurs, and we know that it happens quite often, okay, probably again, 1 shot out of 20 in my estimate is actually getting a significant amount. Then what can that stem cell do, and why is it a problem? Well, that stem cell can do only one thing, and that's divide. It's divide to basically avoid the poison and protect a part of the genetic code, right? So what it's going to do, and we know that is a strategy. I call it the evasion by replication strategy. So you put poison into that, whatever, contaminant. It can be the mRNA vaccine, it could be another vaccine, it could be maybe a vitamin, or it could be a toxin or a virus. The stem cell is going to very rapidly divide so that at one point it reaches one that's intact and safe.
It'll divide into two. One will remain a stem cell, and the other will go on to divide into a population of cells.
Yeah, but it's going to continue dividing. Even that one will most likely still have enough poison in it that it still needs to replicate. Right. So if you need to divide 100 times to get to the first level, you see how many divisions you're going to need. What happens? There's two things that happen in consequence of that. I explain in the book. The first point that occurs is then you have an infrastructure of stem cells that is in excess. It's not like we don't have a number of counts that's precise. Why? Because it's not like the way they communicate. They don't send a list we don't send a list of what's needed. It's because you have an architecture that is extremely well proportioned, that whenever there's demand for repair or blood or red blood cells or white blood cells, you get a certain amount. Now, if ever you start having, my analogy is always the same now. It's, if you have 10 or 100 cooks in the kitchen,
too many Indians,
and you ask for a burger, you end up with 100 burgers, right? That's what you do. That's what you get. You end up with 100 burgers, which is a definition of cancer, right? It's the very definition of cancer. You create. So if it's in the bloodstream, if it's a blood cancer, you're gonna have leukemia, okay? Which is a definition. You have too many lymphocytes, okay? If it's a solid tumor in an organ, you're going to have a tumor, which is a definition of an excess of unwanted cells in a place it's not supposed to be. Now, let me tell you two elements that are very important to convince your audience that I'm pretty sure that's what's happening, even though it's a conjecture. I admit it. Okay. There's the first point is that for the past 20 years, there's been considerable research that has been stating that cancer cell of origin, so basically the original cancer cells, are stem cells. Okay, I didn't invent that. I said it can only be this way. But then when I started looking into it, I found a whole literature of people who have been saying, look, it has to be a stem cell that starts cancer. I guess nobody was, how should I say, crazy enough to say that it could be vaccine, because it was probably a bad career move for a researcher. that's why it has to be an MBA that finds this, presumably. But there is considerable literature across the world I quote it in the book that shows that says, and the reason for that is because when you look at the features of a cancer cell, for example, something that people have been talking about a lot, which is p53 inhibition, a gene that stops apoptosis. Well,
but it's just called a non-pro-suppressor gene that stops cancer.
Well, yes, but it's also it's because it's p53 is the gene that permits apoptosis, which is suicide, self-suicide, right? So if you're a cell that can't commit suicide,
and something goes wrong,
you have a problem.
But all you can do is divide and reproduce.
Because stem cells are so precious, they can't commit suicide, and they have p53 inhibition. They not only have they p53 inhibition, but they don't have MHCs because they need to be immune privileged because you don't want the immune system to attack them.
So this major histocompatibility complex is what allows the immune system to recognize the difference between the self and the non-self cells.
Exactly, except stem cells and progenitor cells either don't have it because they're too precious, especially the senior ones, or when they get specialized, they get immune suppression, okay, so that the immune system doesn't target them. And so there is the expression of a gene called HTERT, which repairs the telomeres. Of course, if you're a stem cell, you're replicating all the time, and you need your telomeres to be repaired constantly.
So that the telomeres are the end parts of the chromosomes, and when the telomeres get smaller, that's associated with aging.
Exactly. So stem cells cannot afford to age. So there in the book, I list a number of features that are stem cell specific, and that supposedly the traditional cancer theory says that normal cells have regained all of these features. And that, to be honest with you, I had never questioned that myself. But when you think about it, from a mathematical standpoint, from a probability standpoint, it's impossible. It's impossible that systematically they would always mutate back to a stem cell. There's each time you're talking millions, one chance in a million of it happening, and you have like 15 or 20 different elements that are specific.
Well, then you mutated back to immortal cells, aren't they? That will go on dividing forever and ever.
Oh, what?
Well, that's what the traditional theory says. But what the reality of it is, my theory, or my hypothesis now, is that that's not what's happening. What's happening is what evolution is trying to avoid by hiding it away, is contamination of stem cells, and therefore damaging on the one hand, creating too many stem cells, and the other aspect, which is also then you'll see it's very clear, what happens during cell division, which mitosis you were talking about. What happens is that there's no nucleus. So the in a way, when I say stem cells are bunker, they're hidden away, and then the genetic material is hidden away also inside the cells. It's protected by a nucleus inside the cell. But during mitosis, this is gone.
The wall of the nucleus goes and the chromosomes are...
Exactly, the chromosomes split up.
Yeah.
Now imagine, you don't, again, I don't need to prove any of this because it has to happen. If you have a contaminant at the moment of that, it's going to tinker, and it's going to interact with both the process, so the separation process, possibly breaking it, miscalibrating it, so you'll have two chromosomes staying in one area, no chromosome going on the other, depending on which side it's at. So you're gonna have the Down syndrome or other monosomy and trisomy elements. If you have material that is actually DNA, which we know from Kevin my friend Kevin McKern's work, that DNA can integrate or actually into the new nucleus, right? It can actually integrate with the chromosomes or simply in the nucleus by just being present, and therefore you've changed the DNA of one human being. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be significant, but you can actually do that, and you can actually also damage the DNA. So in the bonus theory framework, I think you were showing earlier, all the three ways that you can harm genetically human beings happen in that area and in that area alone, in stem cells. A lot of people have been talking about integrating into the genome of humanity. I'm not that panicked on that because some people will have that. They are at risk, but it needs to be the germline. It needs to be evidently a male in age or of procreation or wanting to procreate, etc. And not all of the boluses are going to go to the testis. Sometimes they're going to do considerable damage, and the stem cells will be destroyed. So the window is going to be small. I don't think the human genome is going to be irreparably harmed by that. Put a little calm on that. But clearly, it explains many genetic disorders. Now, I shared with you my experience, my test. I tested the bolus theory on autism. When I started writing this, I started building a structure, and that was a painful intellectual process, as you can imagine. And so one afternoon I said, okay, let's stop the structure. It's just my brain is blown away. I need to rest, and I'm going to do something. I'm going to test my theory on something that I know nothing about, which is autism. I mean, you can see there's a brain there. I'm fascinated by the brain, but I had always left autism aside because it's too much of it's a complex system in movement and development. I don't think, I don't like working on things that there's too many rabbit holes. But I did say, look, I said, all these mothers are correct that state that they had a child that was healthy, that got vaccinated and had Alzheimer's, had autism after. Then it has to be the bolus, and I'm right, it has to be the bolus. Then I can state a few facts, hypotheses that need to be true for my theory to be right. Why? Because you know that a person who had bolus and had the bolus hit an amygdala and damage it, there's a huge proportion that this bolus is going to hit elsewhere. It's a chaotic process. So it's going to hit another areas of the brain. It's going to hit the arterial system. It's going to hit the heart. It's going to hit all. So basically, I had already listed all of the framework that you saw, and I said, okay, well then, if you are autistic, there's a fair chance you're going to have more Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that you would have had an early stroke as a child, that you will have hearing impairments, that you will be more often blind or would have more visual problems than the general public, that you will have endocrine disorders, all of them, and in some cases you're going to have secretion, you're going to be releasing too much hormone. In some cases you're going to have destroyed the gland, so you're going to have hyposecretion of hormones. You're going to hit the heart, and you have congenital heart disease. You're going to hit the intestines. You're going to have leaky gut.
Of course, these would all be in one people. If you have got one bolus, it's likely to damage more than one tissue.
Exactly. So at a population level, if you compare the population level of autistic and healthy people, they should have more of these medical conditions, including cancer, including obesity, including genetic disorders. I listed 40 of them in that afternoon, and I went on to look for odds ratio. And they all came out positive. 40 hypotheses. Just imagine.
So when autism is likely one of these other conditions, is also more likely to be present in a non-autistic person.
Yes, in the book you can go. Here's part of the list, and you see they have their allergies 4.5 odd ratio, Alzheimer's 2.6.
So that's 4.5 times more likely to have allergies.
Yeah, blindness 1.5. Bone, joint, muscle problems, 7.5. Cancer, 1.9. Celiac disease, 1.87. Crohn's disease, 1.37. Endocrine disorder, 2.92.
That's like nearly 3 times more likely. These are huge. Is this known in the medical literature? There's no not. It just seems incredible.
It's known that they have that, but nobody. I'm the first person to explain why it's happening.
Fundamental underlying cause.
Yes. Everybody thought it was genetic, etc. Nobody, And what's interesting, to be honest with you, John, what's interesting, it's not limited to autism. When you start looking at people who have cancer, and you find that they often have arteriosclerosis, they have leaky gut, they get fat, etc. When you have all of these other they coincide. So it's going back to what I was telling you, for me to be wrong, and for this theory to be wrong, after 40 hypotheses, that's one chance out of 1 trillion. Right? It's like me not knowing a nuclear plant and saying, let me tell you 40 things in a row that have to be true to build a decent nuclear plant without me knowing anything about nuclear energy. It's impossible. It's impossible. So
that's based on the hard data. This is not on-chain science. This is going out, getting the data, testing it empirically, and finding out it's consistent.
Yes, I had a conversation 6 months ago with a British Nobel Prize winner. We spent 90 minutes together, and I explained him my theory, and I told him about this 40 hypothesis. His answer was, "Wow."
Well, that's my answer, and I'm not even a Nobel Prize winner.
No, but it's mathematically impossible that I'm wrong. It says this is what it says. It's very important. That's why I dedicated 3 years of my life to this.
Oh, I know. What you've done is stunningly impressive.
Because there's no way this is not happening.
Whatever you do, even if you're not interested in Mark's book, he deserves people to buy this book. So go and buy it.
Yeah, I'm broke. Yeah, I'm very right.
But if you have any interest in this at all, you will find it fascinating and very well researched.
This is really good.
Where do we need to go, Mark? How on earth do we get authorities?
Basically, how deep the syringe goes into your arm. Because when you pierce through
first of all,
the blood,
my book needs to come out.
Then blood, nerve membrane, whatever. It's like a little tiny hole in that cell, and then everything will start to leak out.
But there's also been,
there was a guy that almost died. His friend almost died after 10 days because he had internal bleeding because of the needle going in too deep.
So if you have a theory that doesn't make sense, and you're on the
and apparently Down syndrome. All the kids with Down syndrome, but the majority of the kids with Down syndrome, their mothers claim that when they came out, they're normal babies. After they got vaccinated, is when they got all fucked up.
Oh yeah.
Apparently, but not autism though. Apparently.
Spike theory, which people have been talking about. Every single vaccinated person is going to have circulating spike in large numbers. Okay. Therefore, if they're healthy, it means that their theory is not reproducible. It's been tested on millions of people and billions of people, and billions of people are okay.
Oh no shit. Okay, I
And
get
that's
it.
basically what.
That's why that guy was able to get like 100 vaccinations.
Yes, of course. It happened to my son. I can tell you when I got the D-dimer reports from him 2 years
So it's like
ago, I
a
was very
extra
happy with
it's
it.
like
Okay. But we need to acknowledge
steroids on
the
steroids.
camp that has been a whistleblower camp, and I was part of that, and I've been part of that for 4 years now, have to base themselves on facts and reality. The reality is that
What?
antibodies do their work.
Oh, I think it's a hey
and they
baby.
bind the spike. So after a few days, spike is gone. If ever,
In most people.
yes, but even if some people have, even if what I just said about genetic disorders, integrating the DNA into a few stem cells, it's never going to be the problem, because our bodies know how to deal with amyloids or with foreign proteins that we're not supposed to have. We have antibodies for that, and they do their work.
And the only reason I know this is because I was always in the hospital as a kid. I was always sick. Always.
The IgG4, for example. IgG4, a lot of people don't realize that there are no antibodies. There's no spike being produced after jab 2, or hardly any.
Okay.
And therefore, it's natural that the immune system would start producing IgG4 to reduce the antibodies, because you would have antibodies wandering around for nothing.
Okay.
That also is proven. So the problem is as a community,
which is caused allergic reaction. Because I will be
communicating well.
Attacked by pollen, it will store it, store the antibodies for when the next time it happens, and boom, it blows out a bunch of antibodies outside with the others, so I will have a reaction.
Most of the theories are not sustainable. I know mine is extremely robust. It hasn't budged in 3 years. The more I advance, the more it's robust.
Oh, really?
It actually scales. So now I don't say it's only limited to vaccines. You can have vitamin problems.
Yeah, it does with fucking antibiotic.
This taste in the mouth you're talking
Try
about.
getting antibiotic now, it's fucking impossible. They were dishing that shit out to me multiple times a year. For sometimes more than 12 days. I was on antibiotics for like a month once.
Yeah, but you got mild antibiotics.
When the bonus
saturates
some
they're not
I got steroids. I got fucking prednisone.
Where do we go from there? Well, first of all, my book needs to be people need to understand it. They need to learn.
Mine were little tiny white ones. I had to take 6 of them.
I thought they were easier to swallow because they were bigger.
Oh, they make me so sick too. I like fucking always throw
up.
Yeah,
I felt like I was eaten from inside.
Oh, that's fucked up.
Like the infection was
like are related to
being eaten by the antibiotics.
The first one is
because antibiotic is an infection that eats everything.
Because it's not true. Not everybody's been harmed. Thank God our bodies are wonderful. And they
despite this ludicrous, reckless experiment,
despite the craziness, okay, and
I like his words better.
So that's the first.
He's got great words. They've already dished out some like 2 good words on him. Like you, sir, have fantastic words.
Is we need to reinvent injection,
and it's his second language. So
if you believe in vaccines,
look at the hail pellets.
I think we've gone too far. I think we could cut down many of the vaccines. HPV, many chickenpox, plenty of vaccines.
It's already melted, so.
Our children, I don't think our children need them, but we need to overall at least a delivery.
The vaccines that we do give should be evidence-based.
So much for him wanting to do a 12-hour day.
That's even a different thing. My position here is I think it's going to be very difficult to fight vaccines. Because it's ingrained into the mind of many people. If people want to vaccinate themselves or their children, my position is, it's your right, but I don't want you to harm your children.
Well, I am fucking sure you don't, so sorry.
Exactly.
I do want you to harm your children. They're all fucking bratty. They can pop in the mouth.
Overall, entirely,
it's a little hard. Just a bit.
Maybe it's
shit.
Whatever. I don't want
no, but you know what I was thinking today? Imagine every time your child misbehaved, someone ordered to have it.
And the last point is an extremely important point.
Why do we allow this to our pets? Like, if a dog misbehaves, it's not because the dog is a bad dog. Because you're a bad dog owner.
If you're a child biting another child, you bite your child.
Make amends. And one word for them to make
If your child fucking beats up another kid, then just kind of be like, I want your kid put down.
And the way
Failed prototype.
Failed prototype, yeah.
Oxygen therapy is certainly a way. It doesn't solve everything. It doesn't solve fibrin, for example. And nattokinase is probably helpful for that. But
I'm all broken.
I'm all itchy.
All the diseases related to microperforation.
It's making me grum.
For many of the disease where you are harmed, where you have had necrosis, if it works for necrosis after radiation, it most likely works for
or sometime after infection,
after an ischemia.
I have that here.
I think we don't have enough in the world today. We don't have enough hyperbaric chambers. Certainly not. But we can go with oxygen therapy, normal baric, and normal oxygen.
My nana was in one of those.
Stem cell that way. So there's a
For a
huge
year.
hope for the world to repair
Because she broke her
people
spine.
who have been harmed.
Tell yourself, people are dying in their 40s.
Grandchildren, maybe your grandchildren.
Back in
I don't have
like,
grandchildren
not even
yet.
100 years old, another 100 years
Yes,
ago.
Now we have people who are almost
I
100 who are
could
running the
actually,
country.
There's more than 100,000 people on this planet that's
two or three of my
over
boys
100
could be
years.
dad,
I didn't even know that. It's
I
fucking
Googled
terrifying.
It is terrifying. It's like, how many centennial?
but
It's like
we-
121,000
I think the generation
on the planet.
that is today 25 and under or 30 and under have been.
I think
harmed
he would die from getting
considerably because they've
vaccinated.
Had
I think he was vaccinated so he could see
80
his daughter.
shots in their life.
Yeah.
And when you look at the probability of being hit by a bolus and a severe one, it's almost. A bolus is almost 100%. It's 100%. So we need.
Unexploded weather station.
We need the collectiveness,
Make a wish.
our community, to open up their eyes. Right?
What?
Look at
I
this
said I
stuff.
want your undying
That's why
love.
Well, you don't have to wish that. You already have that.
Biologist and a lung doctor. I took
Stupid.
a hack of an engineer.
Switch to the lottery.
I don't know.
I won the lottery.
As an engineer.
Oh, you're right.
My dad, I come from a family of engineers. I have a DNA of an engineer. What I have done is I've structured everything like an engineer would do, and I was trained as a consultant always to prove what I say. So most of the time when I tell you something, I have 3 or 4 different ways to cross-prove it, because I know I'm going to take a lot of flack, and therefore it makes my book extremely documented. I think I have
Very well done.
450, maybe 500 scientific references. It's extremely logical. There's no.
Probably the most logical thing I've heard in the past 5 years.
Happening and why they make sense from an evolutionary.
I say a lot of logic stuff.
This is basically everything that I've been saying. We've been saying.
People need to learn about the bolus theory. They need to understand what it means for them, for their future, for their cure. And we need to start talking to making this public, like we are doing today. And word of mouth needs to work so that it gets to the authorities and they get their act together.
Yeah, and it's no longer driven. Absolutely.
There's no other way. It's a message of hope, huh?
Yeah,
a message of hope.
It is. That's great. Whatever you do, find Mark's book. You won't be disappointed.
Yes, please do.
I encourage you to go on for an hour and 15 minutes now, Mark. So I think that's probably enough. I'd like to do one more thing. On YouTube, you have something called YouTube Shorts. So you can put up 1-minute messages. Would you like to give the concise message of what we've talked about in French for our francophone listeners?
You can try.
Yeah, go for that.
Alors, John m'a reçu depuis un peu plus d'1 heure et j'ai parlé de ma théorie du bolus, qui est grosso modo le fruit de 10 000 heures de travail et qui s'explique un bouquin que j'ai écrit en anglais. La teneur de ce travail, c'est de dire que les vaccins et les injections intramusculaires depuis 50 ans,
Like that's what French is supposed to
sont
sound like.
systématiquement
Yep.
mal injectées.
Beautiful.
C'est-à-dire qu'elles vont pour partie dans le sang directement et causent l'ensemble des maladies modernes, l'autisme, Alzheimer, Parkinson, les maladies endocriniennes, etc. Voilà ce dont j'ai parlé avec John, qui me recevait pour la deuxième fois amicalement.
Voilà ce dont j'ai parlé.
It's so
De quoi je
long.
parle.
That is so long to get to the point.
Voilà de ce dont je veux parler. De quoi je parle.
That's what I learned at the airport, where like instead of saying like si tu veux, you say si vous voulez, if you would like,
Yeah.
instead of like what do you want? Because saying like fucking tu veux, like, but it's like saying like
Qu'est-ce que tu veux?
Like, what do you want? it sounds rude apparently. I was like, okay.
Let's talk again. I think you've got a coherent theory.
Fait que ça va?
You really need to listen to
Comment
it.
allez-vous?
Oh wow.
If you say ça va, it means like,
What's up?
It's actually, I wanted to
Comment
propose that
allez-vous?
we jointly together, we
God.
should review some
comment
cases.
allez-vous aujourd'hui? On se bonjour.
Oh wow.
With that
That's
framework,
awkward.
it
Like,
makes it
how are you
so-
doing today in this beautiful day?
You sound like you should be like a maitre d'.
Right?
Sometimes you're wondering,
You're on a speaker,
how can that occur?
Yes, that's
But
weird. It's
with
like a
the
whole different
framework
language though.
that with the theory that I have, it's all very, very
Concerning.
eye-opening in a way. You know, it's.
And when
Once
you-
you-
No, it's kind of like woo. I'm super smart.
To view it through the lens-
Hey, he's got a golden one.
Oh cool.
First time I see a golden one.
Exactly.
Now, Mark, thank you very much, and we'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting me again, John.
Pleasure.
The end.
Nice shot, sir.
Cetaphil Healthy Radiance Brightening Face Serum is a discreet approach to effectively brighten
Okay.
different sorts of dark spots. and improve
Fuck that what?
Fuck that.
Unevenness and fine lines. Cetaphil, we do skin, you do you.
Ew.
You do you, boo. Okay, there's all you walk out in there. Put the coffee in there.
Can you write coffee on the whiteboard?
Huh?
Can you write coffee on the whiteboard? Please. Oh, I'm gonna go to that coffee shop tomorrow.
Okay.
It's around the corner. Cafe Gourmet.
You've been a monk for
Those
30
coffee
years.
take 2 E.
If I look across society,
Coffee.
Coffee. That's not coffee.
Coffee.
Coffee. There's a V. Coffee.
Oh, that's true. I forgot there was a V.
Yeah.
Fuck, people fucking lost their fucking minds
because
over
it
that
looks
one.
like COVID and then coffee.
No, people were like,
Cool.
what is the secret code message that he's trying to tell? Like, I was like, fuck, like, literally, it's just him, like, still taking a shit. Like,
Yeah.
he had to wipe his ass. That's what
I
happened.
saw in the news thing. It was not Kim Kardashian. The other one. What's her name?
Taylor Swift.
Huh?
Taylor Swift. I don't know. Kylie.
She's she did a selfie, well, whatever, FaceTiming. She's in a public bathroom, so she's sitting, talking, like she's just in private talking, and they make it a big thing that she's in the toilet. Like she's not even like she's just sitting in the toilet.
Was she Kim Jong Un? She's fucking shit.
She's
Like,
just talking. Like, no, but they took the image saying like, oh, she's showing herself in the bathroom, but she's like, if you want to go in private to talk to someone on the phone, you're in the mall, you just go in the bathroom and you talk. Something like that. And there's a big scandal now because she was in a toilet. and
Oh,
talking on the
God,
phone.
no.
Like, oh my god.
fucking. She's obviously a Russian spy.
Oh my god, she's obviously a Russian.
Fuck, like, no, like, and they're like, is there anywhere on the planet that would be like a good place to move to live? I'm like, Russia, probably. I'm trying to think of a place. Genuinely, I am. I think Russia probably might be the best place on the planet to live right now. They're doing well.
Right here by your side.
Aw, what is with you and all the love?
But what I love you.
I love your talk, because I saw.
Down, 11:15, down.
Oh, good for him. The guy that killed the fucking Toronto cop got found not guilty. Good for you.
Well, see, in Toronto, man, they always come either in civilian clothes or like their clothes, but no badge, no nothing to show that they're police officers. They're a band of people in the dark attacking you. Like, of course, I'll defend myself. You're going towards my car, and I think you want to fucking like the car theft is so high. Fuck that! I roll you over, man. I'm in the car.
No, I think they are. Kennedy weekend. Pregnant wife, 2-year-old son passed by a man who been stabbed as they returned to their car. Toronto City Hall inside to approach their vehicle, banging on the window. Both dressed in plain clothes, investigating the stabbing. Testify. Oh wow. Okay. Police. He feared there were criminals in this case. Wow. What? So he was not in uniform, and he went to stop this guy. Like, he was banging on the windows, and he was like out to having like a family outing, and he came up and like fucking started going at him. Oh wow. He was already on the ground. 3 police officers testified. Called the wait, what? Because I heard that there's a theory that it could have been that there was something by his coworkers. Because like there was 3 cops that testified that said that they saw him kill the cop, and they're like, that's physically it would like the damage of the car or like where the damage is claimed to be, there would be a huge fucking bump on his car.
After the verdict, apologized to Zamir for when he was run over. But
For many police agencies, for many Canadians, about how we want police to act, how they should act, especially when they're in plain clothes.
Yep.
Zamir reversed and accelerated toward the exit, knocking Northrup down. Experts from both sides testified. They also told the court Northrup was already on the ground when he was run over. But 3 police officers testified he was standing with his hands up. The judge was critical of what she called the Crown's morphing narrative, and after the verdict, apologized to Zamir for what he's been through.
Thankfully, the jury saw the case for what it was, a tragedy, an outright tragedy, but not a criminal offense.
For Northrup's family and the Toronto police, more questions, more heartache.
I'm very disappointed in today's outcome. From day one, all I've wanted is accountability. We miss Jeff every day.
I share the feelings of our members.
Yeah, but you're gonna put an innocent man in jail for it? Just make you feel better?
While exactly what happened in that garage may never be known, what is certain is a man was killed and lives changed forever. Jamie Strachan.
There's a theory that it was the 3 cops that had something to do with it.
There is electromagnetic
and they
energy
threw and that
We know, sir.
they put it in French now too. If this ad couldn't get worse, it's also in French. But the theory is that the 3 cops had something to do with him getting murdered or him getting killed, and they threw his body in front of his car from behind the wall. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
Oh.
It's just like a random theory that I heard in passing.
Last warning, get out of this. Ah!
Yeah. Oh, they took Lunchables off the market. Lunchables are completely taken off the shelves. Remember those snack packs?
Yes.
Apparently, those things are super fucking not good.
What? I ate a bunch of those.
I ate so many of those. Like, I lived off of those, like, all summer.
Stop giving students Lunchables. Those are packaged food items that generally are really popular with kids, but the Watchdog group says it tested them and found that some Lunchables contain potentially dangerous levels of harmful contaminants. Nancy Chen has been looking into this for us. Nancy, good morning.
Nancy.
Is it true that Lunchables contain lead? Nancy. Yes, it is true. We're poisoning children now. In fact, this is merely a more extreme example of something that is endemic and indeed normalized. To give children the amount of sodium and sugar that we do amounts to poisoning, but it's all a glorious circle of life. If you keep feeding kids shoddy, dreadful food, then you can, of course, heal them using equally shoddy and potentially ineffective medicines. And the circle of
Wow,
life.
Russell, you're on a fucking run.
Right?
Anticipated answer. Thanks for joining.
That's why he's
Lunchables
fucking
are
turned
really been a
religious,
long
because he
time
needs
since they sold
Jesus.
lunchboxes across the country, but Consumer Reports, an independent nonprofit group, issued a scathing assessment of the lunch kit, saying, quote, "We don't think anybody should regularly eat these products."
No shit.
Great.
Not regularly,
It's
obviously.
food. That's not something you want to hear about food. Should it? All food should be edible. That's the minimum requirement for food. Is this food edible? Well, I mean, you can put it in your mouth and break it down with your teeth and swallow it. So, yes.
This came after testing that allegedly found some store-bought versions contain high
Cadmium, oh
levels of
shit.
metals, lead, and cadmium.
I don't
They
know
can
what
cause
that is.
developmental issues. in
It's
children,
what you
even in
use
small
to
doses. Study also
electroplates,
found concerning amounts
solder
of
electroplates,
sodium as well as
silver
phthalates
on aluminum or
used in
other
plastic
metal. You use
packaging
cadmium.
Come on, man. This is getting out of control, isn't it? Poisoning children. Yeah, high levels of sodium, phthalates,
Solder,
lead,
silver,
cadmium.
you need cadmium.
These are the
Super
type of
highly toxic
stories
and volatile.
that breach the surface are discernible, demonstrable, and easily
An
corroborated.
ingot of cadmium,
That
if
makes
it's in
me
your
more
car, you
willing
can get
to listen to
intoxicated
and
Oh,
by
fuck
the
off,
air.
really?
It's solid, yeah.
theories
Doesn't need
about,
to be,
for example,
dust or
I don't
anything.
know, chemtrails.
It
or
makes your
things in the
environment
I mean,
Toxic.
there is
It makes the
such
air toxic,
negligence,
yeah.
disregard, and occasionally malfeasance present in big food, big pharma, and the kind of systemic abuses that pass mass continually through our lives. That how can you just outright say, "Oh no, that's ridiculous"?
Love you.
Just seems
Have
at
a
least
good shower.
worthy of contemplation that this is systemic, deliberate, if not just the inert practices of a careless system. Man, I don't know if I can even watch the rest of this. Let me try.
That are also hormone disruptors. Last year, after changing some of the nutritional content, Lunchables were allowed into the National School Lunch Program for the first time, giving tens of millions of children access.
Someone lobbied to get it permitted to be in the school lunch program so that it could be some great catering company's deal to put Lunchables into school catering. They can buy it en masse and profit. Someone got lobbied, someone got biased, and no one at any point stopped. In a sensible and sane world that you can imagine, just on the periphery of your mind, you just go, don't make that product anymore. Do you know what we should do, actually? Right, what we should do is we should feed children food that's either been grown or hunted or otherwise harnessed from the area that we're all living in. That might mean that there are less opportunities for profit. But let's focus all of our attention on localization. Let's for a minute stop regarding everything solely from a materialistic perspective. Lunchables is the pinnacle of the pyramid of commodity that we all lay sprawled upon, the base of your spine pierced, you spread-eagled and hopeless, pummeled by a system of deep, deep loathing. And the only way down from this crucifix, and maybe Jesus, maybe we should just stay on it, is to awaken immediately.
On a near daily basis. Now Consumer Reports is calling on the Department of Agriculture to remove Lunchables from schools. In a statement, Kraft Heinz, which owns Lunchables, defended the product, saying it meets strict safety standards.
Very strict safety standards, and they include cadmium and lead being edible for children. So, what do you ejaculate into that stuff? I mean, what if that passes the test? What is the test?
Escalated quickly. Can I have some milk, please?
In the environment and could be present in
What?
low
Can I have
levels
some milk,
in
please?
food products. But this is a staple for so many families because they're so easy to pack.
Well, yeah, or in this case, it's taxpayers funding the lunches going to low-income kids.
Brilliant. There's a point where you have to just stand back and applaud. Taxpayers are participating in the poisoning of working class children. Amazing. It's actually costing you money. They've found a way to make poisoning children profitable, double profitable.
Why do you think they suddenly give a shit about the homeless?
Diabetic and full of heart disease. When they're obese at bare minimum, they've got a drug for that now.
Thank God for your fat kids, because then I get cheaper clothes.
We'll become radicalized. I wonder if Kraft spend any money on legacy media outlets. I wonder if sometimes between these shows you see Kraft going, hey, if you don't have time to feed your children food that doesn't have lead in it, how about some food that does have lead in it? The truth is that if you are a parent, and I am, sometimes you think, well, maybe a little bit of lead will calm them down. The simple
and letting your head would calm you down, right?
And political and social model.
Well, fucking lobotomies.
This is what I say to you.
Yeah, I know, but lobotomies. That's basically what it is. You're just killing your brain.
We're banning that. We're never doing that again. Shut that shit down. What's the reason we're doing it? Oh, lobbying, donations, because Kraft advertising and legacy media. Oh, right. Well, God, let's break down all of those monopolies. Let's no longer permit that. Let's certainly not use taxpayer dollars to subsidise it. Let's, from now on, have democracy available at the smallest level of subsidiarity, that people control their own lives and their own communities. That way, if there are cultural, religious differences or differences of traditionalism versus progressivism, they'll be nullified and irrelevant, because in one state, people can believe in this, and in another state, people can believe in something else. But what we should believe in every single state is don't poison your children just because it's profitable.
There's a report saying it's hurting those kids.
Especially if you're a mom, Nancy, that's not making the sandwiches and putting them in the paper bag. Hello, my name is Gail. They were very easy breezy. Yeah, I ate all that growing up. I hope they can figure that out.
Lunchable says they're meeting the standards. The question is, are those standards sufficient?
Yes.
Very, very concerned. All right, Nancy, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Moving on.
He doesn't have children.
Obviously not.
From Kraft or
look at him, he's super swag.
Organizations.
He's super swag. Black guy with a bow tie.
Those questions. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can thrive, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed.
I don't want to become a member of anything. Except the fucking Not Cool Kids Club. That's the only fucking place I want to be a member of. Which I am.
That's the headquarters.
What? No, Fatale's the headquarters.
No.
Everyone at Fatale is not a cool kid.
That's the battlefield.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Our headquarters is here.
Yeah.
Ours.
I used to call my parents' house that headquarters. But no one understood what I was talking about.
HQ's here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I used to call it.
HQ, baby. We call it QM.
QM.
In the Canadian military, it's a QM. Quartermaster.
Oh, quartermaster.
That's where they give you all your stuff and everything.
Sounds like a DM.
Kinda, yeah. Like, you want some boots, you go to the guy at the QM. You want some pants, you go to the guy at the QM. And register your gun. QM. And he knows which one goes where, so
that's what she said.
Better bring back your gun. Don't switch to someone else.
Oh, why?
You'll know.
Oh.
Shit.
You would think so, eh? But apparently there's something like 80,000 guns that are not accounted for in the Canadian military.
Yeah, but one that we don't use.
No, apparently they're ones that have been checked out and literally are just not accounted for, and they get it. They just like they can't go anywhere without it, so like they have to replace it. And then the last one's just kind of like forgotten about. I was like, that's so fucking concerning.
Because when they go in overseas mission, it costs more money to bring back the gun than to make another one. So they leave container shitload.
Yeah, like in Afghanistan, like when they left Afghanistan, there was like literally Pepsi fridges full of drinks. Like just freshly stocked full of drinks. Yeah. And they literally just got up and dipped.
Yeah.
On to fucking save Ukraine.
Yeah.
That went well again.
That went super well, right? Okay, so that's ready for tomorrow morning.
I'll make her sandwich in a little bit. You okay, Jacko?
Okay. Let's go. I love you.
I love you.
Take 3.
Huh. What's up, Boo? Okay, mister? Oh, Checo. Oh, Booby.
Pardon me in my song. You can't censor my throne. I'm only a man, I'm a monster. Somebody comes past and got me. I got a 6 inch for a process. So now I'm coming for the whole roster. Major look, huh? Yeah, this is what this shit was.
Gross.
So excited to bring back onto the show Matthew Ho, a disabled Marine combat veteran for peace and a senior fellow with the Center for International Policy. In 2009, he resigned from his position with the State Department of Afghanistan in protest of the escalation of the war. He ran as a Green Party candidate for the U.S. Senate to represent the people of North Carolina in 2022 and was sabotaged, of course, by the Democrats. Barry Reich is a retired carpenter and building inspector. He's also a Vietnam veteran, former national president of Veterans for Peace, and has been active in the anti-war movement in the Twin Cities and beyond for over 30 years. Engaging in this work, he has participated in delegations to Vietnam, South Korea, Cuba, and Mexico. As an environmental activist, he focuses on how the military is contributing to climate change. It is a life goal of his to leave the world a better place. So welcome, Matthew and Barry. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, hi, Katie. Good to see you.
You too. I wanted to ask each of you how you became Veterans for Peace. What turned you into Veterans for Peace? Did you have an aha moment? Was it a gradual process?
It's kind of a long story. You know, as a young man, I went from the workhouse. You know, my life was on a downward trajectory. I went from the workhouse into the military, from jail to the military.
It's not a booby.
So that's the way my life was going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was not awoke, you know, at that time. You know, in my era, at high school, you either got drafted or in the military, you got deferred. You know, I had to screw that up my post life. But anyhow, I wasn't on a good path. I served time over in Vietnam, and I regret, you know, I try not to be too hard on the soldiers that are doing the dirty work in Israel because I've been on that side, you know, and I regret things that I've been about. But anyhow, I came home disillusioned, but I wasn't awoke. And then in 1978, I got into recovery for alcoholism, and through that process, then I became awake. You know, so basically since 1978 forward, I just have become aware of what my country is doing, war, and I'm like a multi-issue person, but I focus on war because that just speaks the loudest to me, you know, the personality, environmental destruction, the climate crisis. So anyhow, and then 91, in our first incursion of Iraq, I found Veterans for Peace, and I've been actively involved ever since with that organization. So that tells the story, but that's it.
And what woke you up? You were in treatment, you said, for alcoholism?
Best I can describe it as I was asleep. I wasn't, you know, it was like spiritual awakening, you know, and became conscious. I just was not conscious. It's just like the people that are, you know, following the media today. They're asleep. I was talking to a gal the other day that did, and I was trying to make a medical appointment. She's Gaza? What do you mean, Gaza? I mean, she didn't know the word, you know, and so she's not awake, you know. Most of the American public is not awake, in my opinion.
And what about you, Matt?
Yeah, it's similar to what Barry was saying, and I think there's probably a connection there in terms of the stopping the alcohol that allows you to at least entertain the thoughts of what you took part in, to burst the bubble and to, because what I found for myself was I went to Iraq the first time and I thought the war was screwed up and was a mistake, but I thought I could make a difference. I thought like I could be a moral actor in the war, and that was just complete folly. The war made me an agent of its immorality. And then you lie to yourself, you make excuses. I went back a second time because I thought I could bring home guys alive. I was a better officer than others. And then then I'm at that point morally and intellectually broken for taking part in those wars. But you know what? I'm a piece of meat, and I might as well just continue this. And so I went to Afghanistan, and then seeing Afghanistan was no different than Iraq. I think that was the great hope I had, that somehow Afghanistan was going to be different than Iraq. And of course, everything I knew from reading history and everything else I knew about previous American, what the American Empire had done overseas, and as well here on this continent. But that was in the past. It wasn't connected. My generation wouldn't be making these mistakes, right? Not mistakes. But anyway, and then being in Afghanistan and seeing that there's no fundamental difference between Iraq and the Afghan wars, no fundamental difference between the Democrats pursuing and escalating the Afghan war and the Bush administration, creating, invading, and occupying Iraq. So, for me, it was gradual. I resisted it. I lied to myself. I made excuses. And then one of the things was, though, before I went to Afghanistan, I was, suicidal, and I was drinking heavily to deal with the moral injury of being a part of those wars. And I think what happened, one of the reasons why I was able to see Afghanistan clearly and allow myself to accept that what I was taking part in was wrong, what I was doing, I was being intellectually and morally dishonest with myself, was the fact that I wasn't able to drink in Afghanistan. I wasn't able to numb myself, right? I wasn't able to bring myself down to the level where I thought I should be because of alcohol, and I was able to have these thoughts, right? Because back home, in between the wars, I would just medicate and punish myself with alcohol. And the same thing continued after the wars, of course, until I got help for it. But, so I resigned from my position in the State Department in Afghanistan at that point in 2009. And that brought me into connection with Veterans for Peace and other anti-war and peace groups. And it's, I think some of it is you ask yourself when you're in these wars, when you're coming out of them, when you're dealing with this moral injury of what you've done, what you participated in, one of the questions is, what was it for? And then you find yourself having nothing else. And what is your life for? And then you find an organization like Veterans for Peace, you find guys like Barry, and you feel this way too. You want to blow your head out because of what you did. But now I can do something about it, and I can atone, I can repent, I can be better, and I can be around you all, you understand. And so, VFP, Veterans for Peace, it's not hyperbole to say that for a lot of us, it gave us our life back.
Wow. That's really moving and fascinating that you had such parallel tracks, even though you were such different wars and different times.
No, absolutely. You go to your substance abuse treatment at the VA, you go to your PTSD treatment at the VA, you're in these group therapies with these guys that are 30 years older than you, right? Nothing in common except that you went to war and you regret it. And, thank God you're in those groups because, you're there with people who get it and people who get you and they're willing to give you a chance. And because these guys understand and they're willing to give you a chance, you're willing to give yourself a chance, right? And, but, we all know that the aspects of veterans and the high rate of suicide, a lot of that particular combat veterans have to do with this moral injury from taking part in wars, regretting it, the shame, the guilt, but then not having any way to heal from that. And so that's how the way you heal is you be around other guys who did the same sins that you did.
Wow. So what are your thoughts on what is happening right now in Gaza, but also Iran as veterans? How do you see this conflict going?
Everything that Ali Assault. I mean, it just was so right on the money. I mean, that kind of directs us to just figure out a couple of things to drive us crazy, But the lies and the distortion, it just is, Israel bombs, and then Iran very, openly, let's say we're going to respond. And then the headlines in the New York Times, oh yeah, well, Iran dropped the bomb, and nothing about following Israel. So anyhow, it just drives me crazy. It just, then one thing leads to the next escalation. There's no end to these things. Ultimately, in Ukraine didn't need to start. This didn't need to start. Without U.S. supplying the weapons and the soldiers doing the dirty work, it didn't have to happen. It just absolutely, and it just drives me crazy. The death and suffering of the children, especially, it just pulls at my heart every day, and that's what keeps me involved the most. I've tried to do something every day since October 7th. But yeah, as a former soldier, I try, and like I say, I know I've been on that side too. There's people that are doing the dirty work. It's not net not. Those soldiers are going to have to live what they participated. That's there's no escaping that. There's just no escaping it. They're burning their souls.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah, so I was able to go to Palestine on a Veterans for Peace delegation in 2017, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and that's the occupation. And seeing that for those of us who have not been, who have taken part in our occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, that was holding a mirror up to our face. And so for those of us who went on that delegation, who understood the history, and we understood what was going on there, and we had our opinions on it, but to have that personal experience of seeing these Israeli soldiers doing what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, kicking in doors, going to people's homes, having the checkpoints, right? Humiliating people, having that power over people, right? As well as the abuse, the oppression, and then what we're seeing here in Gaza, of course. I think Barry's point about the lies, so the same lies that sustained Vietnam, the same lies that sustained Iraq and Afghanistan, that created it, you see it again. And so you recognize the same people. And it actually is the same people, right? In terms of, for the Americans, it's the same people in charge who are, I don't really want to call it what's happening with the U.S. role in Gaza as being complicit or supportive. The U.S. is a participant. It's so fully involved. The only thing is that we don't have our kids pulling the triggers. Other than that, we are basically doing everything else. We're a full participant. But the people who are running this war, who are running this genocide, more or less the same people that, for the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, etc. So it's the same people, and if the Republicans were in power, well, it'd just be their tranche. So I think that's, for us, a lot of what we see. It's like holding a mirror up to our faces. And then, of course, the knowledge of what these weapon systems do, what it's like. Many of us have seen dead children, things, been around this, So you know what that's like. But then, too, the idea that so much of this, Israelis could not be doing it without us. So all those bombs that are getting dropped there, those are American bombs. All those warplanes, those are F-35s and F-15s, F-16s, those are all American warplanes. So I think there's a host of things that we see in terms of our roles that we did that now are just being played out in front of us again.
Right. And do you think this is going to escalate?
I personally feel that this is what Biden wanted for forever. I don't think he's trying to avoid anything. They're pushing it along as far as I'm concerned, for whatever reason. If we wanted to stop, we'd stop. Like the guy that was talking about. Well, yeah, we're working at. No,
yeah, Matt Miller. Yeah.
We're not.
State Department.
Yeah, we're moving the Navy in. I suspect on our flotilla we'll probably get our engines some Navy ships. They're moving. Immediately we got to respond. There's never. Hey, where's the Department of Peace? Or where's the Department of Negotiation? Maybe we should sit down and take a look at this before we respond in some aggressive manner. Where is that? We just don't do that.
Right. I think there are those within the Israeli government, most of the ruling coalition, that wants us to escalate. First of all, for those who are in favor of the continuation and the entering the final phases of the Greater Israel Project and Zionism, this is the best opportunity they've had, the best opportunity they're going to get. So carry it out. In order to do that, you need to have these threats, right? As well as what we're seeing this week, nobody's paying attention to what's happening in Gaza. So if you can have these distractions as well as then you can make it seem that here goes the trope of Israel up against all these enemies who surround them who want to destroy them. So what few
living in a dangerous neighborhood, as they like to say.
That's right. So what few Democrats you had who were suggesting, they weren't going to really ever do anything about it, but suggesting that we should condition arms sales to Israel based upon human rights violations, which already is United States law through like 5 different laws, as well as, of course, all the international treaties and conventions we're a part of. But anyway, this is removed all that, right? So we have to give Israel everything they need because they're being attacked by the Iranians, I think the escalation serves political purposes in Israel. It serves certainly ideological or militarist purposes in Israel. I think the Biden administration, though, is horrified at the idea that it does escalate and that they're faced with $5 a gallon gasoline during a campaign. That would effectively destroy Joe Biden's reelection chances. I mean, he's doing a great job on himself, right?
Yeah.
Right. But the White House is also trapped because this relationship with Israel is structural. Even if Joe Biden was to wake up tomorrow and he could end this by calling Netanyahu and saying, it's over, you're not getting anything else from us. Well, the next day the Congress would begin to impeach him. So the structural issue where because we have this system of legalized bribery, the Israeli lobby is able to control our political system just in the way that pharma does and Big Ag does and the banks do and the military and industrial complex does. So I can see this escalation continuing to happen. And then, of course, you have the dangers of where does it go? And it's not hyperbole to talk about World War III. Syria, which is a key ally of Iran, which Israel bombs continuously. That's the proximate cause of Iran's attack on Saturday was Israel's attack on Iran's consulate in Damascus. Well, what's also in Syria? Russian troops and American troops. And so this idea that this could get to a point where you have World War III, that's not hyperbole.
Could you give an overview of all the wars that the United States is involved in? I mean, not that we've found for all of them, but just some of them right now?
One thing I will say is that since 1991, according to the Congressional Research Service, the United States has been engaged in 250 military operations overseas. So you can look at it that way. In its sense of the wars, since 9/11, according to Brown University Cost of War Project, the United States has had troops in combat in close to 20 countries. I think it's 18 or 19. So in the last 20 years, we've had kids or young men and women in foreign countries in 18 or 19 killing and being killed. So the scale of this, in my lifetime, I was born in 73. If you look at, say, go from Western Africa all the way through South Central Asia, all the way to Pakistan, I don't know if there are any countries that haven't been touched by the wars. And then, of course, Ken Klippenstein at The Intercept had a great article a couple of days ago where he talked about what happened over the weekend. And he's able to map it out so that there's 16 countries involved in the current fighting in the Middle East. So whether it's, Yemen or Israel or Hezbollah and, those type of things. Of course, the Americans, the British, the French, but then also, too, you have a lot of other countries like Oman, which is where the U.S. Navy ships go all the time. The U.S. Navy ships that are firing missiles into Yemen are docking in Oman all the time. So 16 countries are involved in this. So the idea that as the U.S. media and our politicians want to portray as this simply being a very binary fight of good versus evil, right? Of civilization versus barbarism, right? You can get into all other things of just Israel versus Iran. That is so far from the truth.
As the official death toll in Gaza nears 34,000, we begin today's show looking at Germany and intensifying crackdown on pro-Palestinian voters. On Friday, police in Berlin shut down a 3-day Palestinian conference just moments after it began. In addition, Germany's Interior Ministry banned several speakers from even entering Germany or addressing the Palestine Congress conference remotely. The Palestinian researcher Salman Abu Sitta opened the conference, but his remarks over a live stream were cut short when Berlin police raided the conference center.
Seen before, they received one massacre after another. Homes demolished over the heads of the occupants. Bodies pulled from under the rubble. Surviving child with all his family killed. You've never seen before people deliberately denied food and water. Children starved to death and killed when rushing to get food. You've never seen before all means of life systematically destroyed. Hospitals, clinics, schools, universities, libraries, ancient monuments, mosques, churches, universities, cemeteries, bakeries, apartment buildings.
So, for all people on the live stream, the police is standing right in front of us and they ask us to stop the video. They're even trying to take away the microphone. That was a live stream capturing the moment when German police raided and shut down the Palestine Congress conference in Berlin just minutes after it began. On Friday, German authorities also detained and questioned the Palestinian British surgeon, Dr. Hassan Abu Sitta, who had flown into Germany to speak at the Palestine Congress. Dr. Abu Sitta, who is a nephew of Salman Abu Sitta, who we just watched interrupted, spoke to Middle East Eye after he was barred entry.
Ironically, I was stopped at the passport office. I was then escorted down to the basement of the airport where I was questioned for around 3.5 hours. At the end of 3.5 hours, I was told that I will not be allowed to enter German soil, that this ban will last the whole of April, and not just that, but if I were to try to link up my Zoom or FaceTime with the conference, even if I was outside Germany, or I were to send a video of my lecture to the conference in Berlin, then that would constitute a breach of German law, and that I would endanger myself to having a fine or even up to a year of prison.
That was the Palestinian British surgeon, Dr. Hassan Abu Sitta, who was flown into Germany to speak at the Palestine Congress, but was denied entry to Germany. German authorities defended the decision to shut down the Palestinian conference, citing German laws against so-called hate speech. When Dr. Abu Sitta came out of Gaza, we interviewed him. You can go to democracynow.org to see that conversation. We're joined right now by former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis. He was also banned from entering Germany and barred from engaging in any political activity there. Varoufakis is a leader of the pan-European progressive movement DiEM25, which helped organize the Palestine Congress. Welcome to Democracy Now! Yanis Varoufakis is the former finance minister of Greece. His most recent book is Techno-Feudalism. What Killed Capitalism is the subtitle. Yanis Varoufakis, can you explain what happened in Berlin?
Amy, we observed it. It would be funny because it's so tragic what went wrong. During the morning, just before the police burst in, as you described so accurately, there was a young man who ended up being at the Congress, a member of the Jewish Voice for Peace, which together with the American 25, we will co-organize the Palestine Congress. And this young man, as he approached the police force, there were 2,500 police, preventing our attendees from attending the Congress. Anyway, he was approaching and getting with his own hands, and he read Jews against genocide. And for that, he was apprehended, arrested, manhandled. And while the police were manhandling him, he turned around humorfully or half joking with me and said to them, "Would it have been right if it said Jews in favor of genocide?" At which point, of course, they were far more angered and manhandled him even more fiercely. I'm conveying this to you, Amy, and to our listeners and viewers, because this shows the absurdity of the whole thing. The police entered the venue, a few minutes before I was due to deliver my talk via video link. As a result, what I did was I recorded my talk and I posted it online from Greece, which is where I'm even now. And the next day, I found out that a ban, as you put it, was slapped on me by the German authorities. A ban that harks back to laws against Nazis, and a law that has only been used recently for ISIS operatives. That was used against me. Allow me just to briefly say that the rationale behind this is the Germans started on the logic or rationale of the German state to protect Jews, which is an excellent rationale. I wish every state had it, each one of us had it to protect Jews, except that this is not about protecting Jewish lives and Jews from anti-Semitism. It's all about protecting the right of Israel to commit any war crime of its choice in the final analysis.
And Johannes Varoufakis, the federal interior minister of Germany, not only applauded the police action, but she described the event, the conference, as an Islamist conference. What do you think of that characterization of the Palestine Congress?
Isn't it remarkably classic that our Jewish comrades who helped us co-organize, put together this conference, have been dismissed as Islamists? Let me be clear. There were no Islamists, and in any case, the reason why our Congress has been so, let's say, unpopular with the German political system is because the German political spectrum, and this is not just the government, this is also the opposition, including some members of the left, I say with deep regret to some of my former opponents, they insist on equating acts of death, atrocities against civilians, which every soundly thinking person in the world should condemn, and I condemn, of course, and so do all the organizers of this Congress. Equated, however, violence against civilians with a principled resistance to an apartheid state, which is part of the project of systematically ethnically cleansing the population of the Palestinians. That is what they do not want. They do not want a Congress like ours, especially one that includes progressive Jews. That is the main thing that they detested, because they were Jewish demonstrators, Jewish activists, Jewish intellectuals, Jewish speakers with us, with one voice saying one thing alone: equal political rights, civil liberties, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. I'm neither a Jew nor a Palestinian. I don't have a view as to how this will be accomplished, but I think every single human person on this planet has an obligation, not a right, an obligation, to demand from the river to the sea equal political rights. And the German political establishment does not want to listen to this. They simply want to associate anyone who opposes Netanyahu's government or any government in Israel that perpetrates genocide, essentially, to be associated, to be stigmatized as an anti-Semite, which, by the way, it is the anti-Semites' greatest dream come true.
Germany has also banned the display of the Palestinian flag. How do you think the suppression of pro-Palestinian protests in Germany, has that spread to other countries in Europe? What's your sense of what's going on throughout the rest of the continent?
Not formally. The Palestinian flag is not banned formally, but I can tell you, even here in Greece, anyone who is supporting the cause of Palestine, walking on the street, seriously risks being assaulted,
by authorities, being arrested, apprehended by police for some tickets. The bourgeois liberal democratic rights and principles have all been sacrificed on the altar of enabling Israel to complete the genocide which is carrying out. It is carrying out not just in Gaza, but as we heard before in the news bulletin, in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. In the same way, in the 1950s, we all had an obligation, a duty, an ethical commitment, or should have had one, to support Jews and to show our solidarity to the Jewish people who were suffering from the Nazi regime, from the Croat Nazi regime, from the Greek fascists and so on. We have a duty today to end the genocide in ancient Palestine.
Yanis Varoufakis, as a former finance minister, a vocal critic of austerity, how do you perceive Germany's position on the war on Gaza in light of its significant arms sales to Israel? I mean, you have Nicaragua taking Germany to the International Court of Justice, saying that by providing weapons for Israel to carry out this war, that it's engaging in crimes against humanity or war.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and I think not coincidental that on the Monday before the invasion, the incursion by the German police into our Palestinian Congress in the venue in Berlin, I happened to be in Milan, in Italy, in Milan, and I was giving a speech to a gathering of hundreds of financial analysts, the top, the creme de la creme of European financial experts. And in it, unbeknownst to me what was going to happen later on that week, I outlined dire prognostications about the long-term damage inflicted upon Germany and Germany's social economy by decades of austerity, combined with impressive largesse of finances, what you call in the United States quantitative easing. And, you know, I was really surprised because here I am a lefty addressing a gathering of hundreds of financial experts. Those hard-nosed financiers actually applauded me, and afterwards they came to me and they said that they agree with what I was saying. And I have to tell you that when that happens, I get really worried. Because if these hard-nosed financiers, many of them German, came to me and they said that they agreed with my prognosis that the German business model is kaput, is in dire straits, I start feeling very uncomfortable. So I think there is a connection. Because here you have a political system in Germany which understands in its bones that the economic dominance that the German industrial model had within the European Union for so many decades is now waning. And when such a regime feels threatened, feels that its economic prowess and authority and dominance is waning, it's really very easy for that to translate itself into movements that essentially fan the flames of increasing and increasingly farcical authoritarianism.
I also want to ask you, Yanis Varoufakis, about Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. The Wall Street Journal is reporting now that the government of Australia asked the U.S. last week if it could reach a felony plea deal with Assange that could result in his return home. I think also today is the deadline for the U.S. government to answer questions that the British judges had, guaranteeing that he would not be given the death penalty if found guilty, and questioning what kind of free speech rights he would have.
Amy, before I answer your question, full disclosure, I'm a very close friend to Julian Assange, and I have been part of a campaign to release him. His only crime is journalism, and because of that reality, I mean, think about it. What he has done is just straightforward journalistic work, which the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, the Spiegel used in order to reveal to the people of the United States, the people of Germany, the people of Britain, and so on, about the crimes that our government has perpetrated behind our backs in our name. Yeah, his crime was journalism. The Australian government, this government by Prime Minister Albanese, initially, after his election, claimed that he was demanding from the United States that the United States, and in particular Joe Biden, drop the charges and drop the request to the British authorities for Julian Assange's extradition. Clearly, they were not heard. And now they are talking about a plea bargain. I can tell you, Julian is never going, even if his life depends on it, and his life does depend on it, he's never going to plead guilty as if journalism is a crime. It's despicable that the government of Australia, given that Julian Assange is an Australian citizen, should be diminishing its own reputation by begging for a plea deal that essentially gives the United States authorities and the national security apparatus what they want, and that is a conviction for Julian. They cannot stand that Julian Assange has never been convicted of a crime. They want him to be convicted of a crime which they can then portray as a violation of American law, of America's statutes and so on. He's never violated any law, except that he has been a pain in the neck for those who were committing crimes in the name of the American people behind their backs.
And Yanis Varoufakis, we only have a few minutes left, but I did want to take the opportunity to ask you about your most recent book, Techno-Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism. I'm wondering if you could lay out some of the amazing arguments that you make, especially about the new feudal lords and the rest of us becoming serfs of techno-feudalism.
Thank you for the question. Look, the moment you enter Amazon.com, you've exited capitalism. It looks like capitalism, but it isn't. There are thousands of buyers and sellers, but we are all, whether we are buying or selling on Amazon.com, we are all the serfs of Jeff Bezos. He doesn't produce anything. He simply has encased us in that digital fiction, I call it a cloud fiction, using very powerful algorithmic capital, which are also called cloud capital. And every time you buy anything, from the book to an electric bicycle on Amazon.com, which is not produced, he charges up to 40% to the vassal capital that is produced it. So markets have been replaced by these digital thieves, and profit has increasingly been siphoned off into what is essentially a kind of rent, like the feudal lords of yesteryear used to charge rent or extract rent from the serfs. My view is that this is what already has happened. In other words, capitalism was killed by capital, not by us of the left, not by trade unions. Capital became so triumphant that, like a stupid virus, it mutated into a very toxic system which kills post-capitalism. That's the basic premise of my book, with repercussions going as far as explaining the new Cold War between the United States and China, because, let's face it, the United States and China are the two countries, economic blocks that contain a lot of this cloud capital. Europe doesn't have it, the rest of the world doesn't have it.
You write that techno-feudalism enslaves our minds. It rewrites the rules of global power. But you also talk about ultimately what it will take to overthrow it. What are your thoughts on this as the former Greek finance minister, Yanis?
Well, imagine a world in which you have your own data, which cannot be harvested by anyone. And if anybody harvests it, you can actually sue them from billions. Then everything will change very, very quickly. Imagine if you, Amy, or I want to leave Twitter, especially after Elon Musk took it. But if I go to Blue Sky or somewhere else, I lose a million followers. Imagine if you could carry your followers along with you through a piece of legislation that allows for, imposes interoperability. And if you want us to go a bit more radically to the left, imagine a world in which every corporation is owned by the people who work in them, that shares become like library cards in universities and colleges, where you simply get it while you're there and you lose it when you're not there. Suddenly, you have a very different world. And if you add to that a digital wallet provided by the Fed to every American resident, suddenly, why would you want to have an account with Bank of America or with Citigroup, who now own your money? They own the payment system. So these are some ideas that progressives can fight around the world if we want to free ourselves from the clutches of the techno-feudal lords, which today not only force us to do things on their behalf, but actually very much train us, to train them, to input desires into our heads.
Yanis Varoufakis, I want to thank you for being with us, former finance minister of Greece. His most recent book is Techno-Feudalism, What Kills Capitalism. German police just broke up a conference that was co-sponsored by his organization DM25, dealing with Palestinian rights.
Quand t'as un sandwich tellement parfait, puis qu'on te le montre comme ça, tu te dis, ça peut pas être juste 4,99. Ben, devine quoi? Le 6 pouces poitrine de dingue de Subway est seulement 4,99. Mais...
What?
We have the mainstream media that is turning on the current government, which just happens to be Justin Trudeau. And believe me, actually are already rare. There's a lot of ammunition that mainstream media has now used against Justin Trudeau and the radical woke liberals, but it's all toppling down finally. Anti-Semitic protests, or even above and beyond that, pro-Hamas protests. You have a Liberal MP that is commenting on this recent clip of what happened in Ottawa. Look at the sheer numbers, and they're literally, this whole protest is celebrating what happened from Hamas attacking Israel, from my understanding, on October 7th. And this is like no longer going to be allowed in Canada. It seems like the government's going to actually take the necessary steps to ban these types of protests. Let's take a look. So this will not be allowed in Canada for much longer. Let's take a look at what the Liberals actually have to say. It's hateful language and it's absolutely, utterly disgraceful. Glorifying terror and death perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th is reprehensible and incites hatred. No protest, whatever reason, should include this despicable language. And we have Leonard.com petrified. Why don't you do something about it? You're the government, you spineless Catholic. This is something that the government has talked about in the past. And Justin Trudeau himself has said that these are anti-Semitic protests. And I think that you're going to say that the government actually cracking down on that. So I'd love to know down in the comments, how does that make you feel? Are you glad that there's going to be an end, we're going to put an end to these protests, or do you think that they should be allowed to Next up, we have Justin Trudeau absolutely getting ripped apart by a reporter for saying he's going to go around provinces to solve the housing crisis. This is very disgraceful. See what they are.
Provinces have again written to you asking you to stop the overreach of their jurisdiction and stop the detention conditions of Commonwealth. Can you explain why you're turning provincial responsibility so much just because the overreach of provinces?
On the contrary, we have worked tremendously constructively with provinces over the past 2 years to deliver things that really matter for Canadians. Take $10 a day childcare. We moved forward with historic agreements first signed here at BC to invest in an area that obviously is something that the province has primary territory. But we recognize that bringing down childcare prices for people across BC, supporting early childhood educators with better wage grid and creating more spaces was something the federal government needed to engage in. So we showed up with a lot of money to help BC move forward on childcare. This is something that's great for families in BC. It's great for getting more women into the workforce, and it's great for young people who are doing better when they get to grade 1. These kinds of things are exactly the kinds of things where we need to be doing more. Now, there are certain conservative provinces that have resisted or objected to us showing up with childcare money. But I can tell you, families that I've spoken to right across the country, including conservative provinces that wouldn't have invested in childcare if it hadn't been for the federal government choosing to step up, are deeply grateful. At the same time as mortgage rates went up for many, many families because of interest rates, they were saving thousands of dollars a month because we kept childcare fees in house. Our focus as a government is on working with provinces to deliver for Canadians. But in areas like the housing crisis, there are certain provinces that are upset again. Not BC, which actually led the way with the BC Builds program, which we've actually adopted and said, okay, any province that wants to do like BC and put $2 billion towards affordable homes with the BC Builds program, we'll match that $2 billion and make sure that even more gets done. That's the way the Federation should be working. But when I hear provinces upset because we're getting deals with big cities
putting money in the city's coffers so that they can increase density, so they can build more homes faster, invest in affordability. I know that's what needs to happen. And provinces that are not being ambitious on housing, well, people in their provinces still deserve to have solutions to the housing crisis, even if the province doesn't want to step up at the same level of ambition. So it's super disingenuous for Justin Trudeau to get out here and say that he's actually trying to work with other different provinces. Whenever he goes to visit Alberta, he does it under the radar and doesn't let them know sort of the premier of Alberta. He goes in and out of places where he knows that he's going to be confronted and questioned by smarter people, which is 99% of the population, but by smarter politicians. And it's just, it's weird, man. He's like a tiny little cockroach. He goes on, unabashed about saying, I am ambitious to solve problems for Canadians right across the country. I am ambitious about investing in solutions to make sure our economy is fair for every generation. I'm going to work where I can in partnership with provinces that want to, like BC and others have, and places where they want to block the kinds of investments that are going to help Canadians. I'm just going to try and figure out ways to help Canadians directly as necessary. I'd always love to work with provinces, but if we have to, I will go around them and be there for Canadians because this economy deserves young Canadians getting the support they need. Yeah, I mean, that is true, but that's just not happening from Justin Trudeau. Time and time again. The best thing that could possibly happen is if we have this coalition come to an end, and we turn things to Justin Trudeau and calls an election, and then we can see a massive change of power. But therefore, it's actually read on mainstream media and debunked it and said, so we love because the after his pension is a sellout, same pension. Take a look at that.
Again, I don't think the election is going to be volley. Volley, so I keep the blue for a month. But of course, not a bunch of volley, they want to get their That's why Jagmeet Singh doesn't want to election right now. He doesn't get mentioned up until next year. So he's keeping Trudeau in power, avoiding election. He might lose, he will lose until he gets past the finish line. So they're putting their pensions and their paychecks ahead of the well-being of Canadians and pay their bill. Another example of Trudeau not want to talk. Again,
I'm not just seeing this over and over and over again. Particularly after his own job, constantly laying out facts and I mean absolutely making a mockery of the Liberals, especially with Jeff Flynn. They got Russell Langston now up on the CTV and just really leaning into the Liberals and their policies.
Okay.
Would a conservative government reverse the capital gains tax? Well, let's get back to this question. The Prime Minister
Okay.
9 budgets ago, the rich pay their fair share. We know what has happened, but that's not the case. It isn't Justin Trudeau and big people like him who have a self-time that can shelter away like pastors and we can live on islands that leave no money to others. Every welders, plumbers, single mothers, seniors that have paid for all of the spending and all of the taxes that Justin Trudeau has imposed on business. So I don't understand. That's not really any question about whether the federal government would change that policy, particularly which does apply actually to corporations. We're going to continue to focus on axing the tax, building the homes, fixing the budget, and stopping the crime. That's what we're talking about Canadians. And I'm sure that when we have a platform, we'll be the first to know, and we might even announce it on the show.
Well, I look forward to that very much. But I think, like in this instance, I'm just asking for your policy position on something very specific that, and I'll be totally transparent. So liberals are using to try and wedge against them, right? They're trying to say that your party, as a consequence of not coming out of support of this measure, is not prepared to make wealthy people in this country pay here. You can dispel that very easily by saying, keep it, or we're going to fight the prime minister who hasn't made anybody pay, or hasn't had the rich guy pay for his promises. He's had everyday Canadians pay for every single one of his inflationary budgets that he's brought forward. And when we do have a platform, we will be the first. So it's fair to you to have to leave all that. So we're going to continue to fight the fight that we've been fighting for everyday Canadians who are paying far too much, paying more for gas, for groceries, for home heating. They can't afford to live, and that's why we are going to go against the budget.
The craziest thing is that in the new budget, that capital gains tax that hurts all of us. That is absolutely insane, man. 63 or 66% capital gains on anything over $250,000. That is absurd. That means that if you inherit a house, if you get a house that grows in value and you get it off and you sell it, you don't even get the money. The government is after everything. It is so weird that this is the state of Canada where the government must be making little amounts of money, so they're constantly fighting to take doing things, and you rely on them for cheap handles, really cheap handles. And you try to crawl your way into the next tax bracket and do something financially or secure yourself financially for yourself, for your family, for your future. You can't, because the government is making all the taking money. And that's why I appreciate Freeland getting confronted right here by mainstream media. This is insane, man. She's speechless, and it's absolutely embarrassing. And good job on this reporter for really doing it.
My focus is not on my focus is on Canada. And our budget today was about meeting the moment for it. It was about fairness. It was about saying Canadians have real needs right now. They need more homes built faster. They need life to be more affordable. They need us to invest in the economic capacity of the country. They need us especially to do it for fairness for younger Canadians who are struggling to get ahead. And they need us to do it in a fiscally responsible way. That is the plan that we put forward today. And it's going to be up to the Conservatives to say whether they support it or not. But the focus that you drew in your response was very much, for example, on the new tax, the changes to capital gains tax. And I'm wondering, did you need to even introduce those changes if you had acknowledged that the housing crisis was what it was at an earlier juncture? Would you need to be spending so much on increasing the supply if you had realized perhaps earlier that you could have dissuaded demand to better impact prices and not raise taxes anyway? Canada is a growing country, and I think that is a great thing. I think as a country, we have been under-investing in housing for a generation. So I am really glad that our government is investing massively in housing, is investing massively in infrastructure to support housing, and I am glad to see provinces and municipalities and also the private sector and not-for-profits really getting involved. I think it's great that Canada is growing. It's just really important to be sure that a growing country has enough homes, that we have homes for young Canadians, that we have homes for new Canadians.
It's artificial growth, right? I mean, they're real people. It's not inflated numbers, it's not imaginary numbers. But it's artificial in the sense that we don't have the infrastructure to house, to accommodate 41, 50 million people here in Canada. So they're bringing in more people where we don't have anywhere to accommodate the people, the jobs for the people, or the housing for the people, the roads, the cars. It's just not enough shit here in Canada for 41, 50 million people. We're taking off, we're biting off way more than we can chew, and then we brag about how many people are in here. And now they have the audacity, the government has the audacity to actually complain about immigration. You've been in power for 8 years, and you have screwed people over, and now you're saying, but we can fix it, we can fix it. That's gaslighting. You're causing a problem, and you're offering to solve a solution. It's insanity, man. These people, they need to go. And look at her. She's breaking the fourth wall. She's looking directly at the camera, at us, while she's being interviewed. It's just, these people are freaking weird.
That That is about fairness, and that's what we're doing. Wasn't that your government's job over the last 8 years? When you say for generations, governments have been underinvesting, doesn't that make your own government possible? Our government has been focused on housing and focused on infrastructure since we first formed government. The challenge is more acute now. It's more acute in Canada, and it is more acute around the world. And we're stepping up, and we're recognizing that. I think the really important thing to take away from this budget is we recognize that it's a pivotal moment for justice. It's a pivotal moment for millennials, it's a pivotal moment for today. In our pre-budget tour going across the country, I heard from so many people, young Canadians themselves, that as much their parents and grandparents say, I want my kid and my kid's friends to be able to afford their own home. I think we all believe that, and we know it takes an activist government which is investing, and crucially, it takes a government that's prepared to lead the charge and change the mindset of the country. Got through the red tape, get municipalities to accept gentle lending. That is all happening. I'm very, very optimistic.
But why weren't you prepared and willing to do that in 2021, for example, when the average price of a home was already 97% higher than 2015? Were you talking to people in Toronto in the age group that you're referencing 2 years ago who thought they could afford a home there, or in Vancouver who thought they could afford a home then? Why didn't you try and meet the moment then to avoid having to spend as much as you are now to try and meet the moment now?
Well, 2021, of course, was still peak COVID. So
going up in 2022.
No, so yeah, but you referred to 2021. That was peak COVID. There were a lot of distortions through that period, and some of those economic distortions are part of the reason that housing is such a challenge. I think the important thing is to meeting the moment now. The important thing.
Interest rates were at an all-time low. Justin Trudeau said that. It was a famous quote where Justin Trudeau said, Glenn, how could you ask that? Interest rates are at an all-time low. And then within months, or within the next half a year, or whatever it was, they skyrocketed, and everybody was shitting their pants. We saw interest rates go from 1% or 0.5% up to 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 5.5%, 6%. It just climbed and climbed and climbed. The government told people, they looked at the cameras and said, we are the government, I am the prime minister, I run the show, and I am saying it's safe for everybody to go and get mortgages and borrow money. Now is the best time because interest rates are at an all-time low. And the next thing you know, they weren't. And everyone is screwed. So it's the government, it's literally the government's fault. They said, go and do this. Okay. And now millions of people are screwed. And they're saying, well, yeah, but there's a lot going on. You just caused the problem. Just admit it.
Thing is to be doing everything we can, to pulling every lever, pressing every button to get more homes built. That is what our government is doing. Our government is also really focused on affordability for all Canadians. And our government is focused on investing on productivity and growth of the economy. And the way we're going to do it is pursuing fairness for all Canadians, especially young Canadians. That's the plan we presented today. I think that's what Canadians want to know.
Why are you so focused, solely focused, I should say, on the supply side? And I'll bring it back to the issue of demand. Because the portion or the number rather of temporary residents in this country has doubled as of January over the last 2 years. Again, not something that happened overnight, happened over the past few years. The government has just now decided to address the temporary stream of immigration. Is there any consideration to looking to the permanent stream temporarily while the housing crisis is as acute as it is? Or is the plan solely to spend more to attempt to drive the supply of housing? Why not tackle demand in a more meaningful way?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. And I do think it's important for us to ensure that housing supply and the number of people in Canada match up. And that's why the work that Mark Miller has been doing over the past few months is so important. Let's remember, change in visa requirements for Mexicans, a cap on international students, a huge source of temporary residents, and a cap on the number of temporary residents. I think that there is more work to do
issue when it comes to temporary residents, particularly when it comes to temporary foreign workers. So I absolutely agree that.
Is it fair to say your government will do more on that?
I absolutely agree that that is important. I do not want to say more broadly. I believe in a growing Canada. I think that that is a strength of our country, that we're able to grow our population. That is a huge strength of ours when it comes to the demographic challenge so many countries are facing. We need to be sure that our housing supply and our population match up. And I think that is what our government is absolutely focused on doing. That is what Canadians want and need.
Do you feel, I guess, some responsibility that your government didn't ensure that was the case over the past few years, therefore somewhat casting doubt on the value of immigration as U.S. values, and so many Canadians have believed. We show polls. You can see polls. The view of immigration has wavered, has changed from the steadfast way that Canadians believe it did contribute to the economy and the fabric of our country over the years. And that is mostly due to the fact that they believe the immigration that your government presided over has negatively impacted their ability to afford a home.
I think that Canadians recognize what you and I are just talking about, what is just common sense, which is we need to be sure that the supply of homes is keeping up with the people in Canada, and we need to be sure that there are homes for young Canadians to live in and occupy. I also think the vast majority of Canadians welcome immigration. They welcome it because of the benefits to our society and the benefits to our economy. But what this budget is really focused on is about fairness for all Canadians, and really delivering the promise of Canada to young Canadians. And you're right to focus on housing. That is central. So is affordability. So is investments in economic growth. That's what we're doing.
I'm glad that you brought up the issue of delivering, because I thought
the reporter Saxon is not buying it at all. This is wild, man. Nazi's kind of been, I don't want to say kissing their ass a little bit, but yeah, sort of. I mean, power play with Nazi, any mainstream media reporter, just over the past 8 years has been pretty soft and only asked easy softball questions to liberals. And now that we're getting closer to election, I feel it. I feel that there might be some genuine passion that, hey, you guys are screwing us over. Like these reporters, they make good money, right? She probably makes $250,000, maybe a little bit more. And like she's probably feeling the effects of our idiot government, of them implementing, or being directly responsible for the increase in mortgage rates and cost of borrowing, and groceries and carbon tax. And so they have a direct incentive to be like, hey, whoa, I'm now getting affected, right? Because it's not just the lower class, the lower income earners, it's not just the middle class, it's everybody across the board. People are making a lot of money. When they go to the grocery store, they've noticed that the bill is almost double. Like everybody's feeling it, right? Even if you make $500,000 a year, you're still spending more than you were 3 years ago. So everybody is noticing it across the board. And that is where the liberals have really messed up, and you thank this party for like 10 plus years. Even the elite or the rich, without the top percent, the top 0.5%, they're going, yeah, man, this government is not good. No, we don't like this liberal government anymore. Maybe they found a way to make money with the liberals over the past few years, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Everyone is feeling it, and of course, shit rolls downhill. So we are the ones that are taking on the burden of all these massive government policy. So let's really get to down to it. Comments. How do you feel about nation media? See what's flipping on what's Trudeau and the representative of Trudeau. On our way out, I look forward to that. Subscribe if you haven't yet already, and I'll see you on next.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Zimmerman.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
La vie, ça va vite. Bouger, créer, travailler. HelloFresh, c'est s'offrir une pause de planification, ajouter de la saveur dans ses soirées et gagner du temps. Visitez HelloFresh.ca.
Remember how Western countries really broke their arm, patting themselves on the back about how we were so kind for taking in Ukrainians because their country was at war? Good for us. 2 years ago, these were the headlines that we could not get away from. This is about how awesome we are for helping Ukrainian refugees. This is from the Washington Post 2 years ago. Well, that warm welcome seems to be over for Ukrainians, and now they are all being sent right back, according to new draft rules signed into law by Zelensky just this week. Here are some of the more shocking changes. First off, all Ukrainians between the ages of 16 and 60 must now carry their military papers at all times. So if a police stops them and they don't have proof that they've registered for the draft, they're in deep doo-doo. If they don't have these papers, a police can forcibly take them into a conscription office, never to be seen again, presumably. Even, if you are already at war, one of the things that these new rules had promised was that the soldiers who have been there for now 2 years are going to have some rules about when they can go home. They don't have a tour, like, that I'll be there 6 months or something. They've been there, the ones that have survived, and they want to go home. They're tired. So the original document was expected to provide for the demobilization and maybe rotate in some new people, but at the last minute, they removed that from the bill. They say they're going to draft something separate to demilitarize those people, but I would not hold your breath. So think about it. We're supposed to care about them, right? Our media tells them we care about them. We don't, clearly. We just want them to keep dying and winning the war that we should congratulate ourselves about. No one cares about these Ukrainian soldiers except us here on the jacket. And so those the soldiers that are there, unequipped and untrained, should go home and peace talks should happen. But at the very least, they should go home. And Ukraine promised them that they would be going home, and now they're not. Can you even imagine? Can you imagine how that feels?
It's awful.
Yeah, it's awful.
So, the secret refugees that are being told by their...
No, we're talking about the men on the front lines now, who have been waiting for instructions. They were promised that this bill would give them at least some kind of silver lining of when they can come home. They don't get that. Look how Western media lies about this. This is Reuters from today. Ukraine Zelensky signs new army draft to reinforce exhausted troops. Well, that's a lie because it's not helping those exhausted troops. They have to stay there. But if they're
not being replaced. Normally,
it's a trick.
Yeah, normally it would be shuffled in, shuffled out, right?
Yeah.
Shuffled in, shuffled out. They're not at all, and they've been stuck there. They know when they're going there to die. They're not coming home.
But the ones that are still there that have survived were promised with this bill that there would be rules for when they can come home. And Zelensky and his government at the last minute removed that. And that's an awful trick. It's a dirty game.
Someone said in the chat, Angela says, well done, redacted, sharing about the Ukrainian soldiers. We have from the beginning been saying that you're literally NATO is sending them there to die. You're wiping out an entire generation of young men right now because of this war.
No, we don't care about that. We care about putting them on the flags on our social media, right? We care about, and I just can't get over how different of an environment this was because again, I remember we lived here in Europe that when the war began, there were moms chats and please from our school bring in any blankets or extra clothes, car seats that you have, and everyone was so excited to help Ukrainian refugees. Take one into your house, can you give them a ride, can you help them with their paperwork? Well, now they're saying, hey, they're sending us back. We don't have documentation to stay here anymore, and we're going to be sent to die. No one's helping them. if we cared, we would say, no, wait, we took these people in, they're safe here, they're staying, they're not being sent back for a pointless war. We don't. Their friends and family are dying on the front lines because their leaders refuse to cede that territory that doesn't want to be done to Ukraine anyway. And so now look at all of these men who will be dragged back into this army to die untrained. So let's go back to some of the rules. Yeah, go ahead.
Aren't we in about 3 generations of men now?
Yeah, I know I say one generation, but if you're talking that 16-year-olds have to carry newspapers on them, right?
Yeah.
They'll be thrown in. And we know that many people have already been drafted.
They're not supposed to.
I know, not supposed to, but they are.
They are.
Yeah, and all the way up until 60 years old. And we've seen the horrible videos of individuals with Down syndrome being thrown into this as well, and it's just absolutely awful right now. Please stop it.
Right. Okay, let's go back to the rules. Now it puts into place university students must all do military training starting in 2025. Recruiters no longer have to find a person to draft them before conscription notices have to be delivered in person. But now, if they send it in the mail, they consider it delivered. You're drafted. And if you don't comply, they're coming for you. Failure to comply with the draft means big fines. Also, your driver's license will be revoked. A separate law lowers the age from 27 to 25 for mandatory conscription. And this is what's causing the most panic of all of those Ukrainians, that those of us outside of Ukraine, we took such good care of them, that now they're panicked because those services will totally dry up unless they register for military service. So that means Ukrainians who go to consulates abroad will be automatically registered to be drafted. So say you need to renew something or get some kind of service from the Ukrainian consulate and you are a refugee, let's say in Spain, well, you're not going to go back to that consulate because you will be drafted and sent into the war. Now they're saying they're not going to do forced deportation, but we'll just see about that because Europe has been very wimpy, I'm going to say. European leaders have said, well, we don't think we're going to be sending those people back. But you don't know. I wouldn't trust a European leader as far as I can throw them. So that means that if you're one of those Ukrainians who was treated so nicely when you escaped in 2022, you're not anymore. If you go to a consulate for any reason, you'll be drafted. That's why scenes like this were happening in the last few days in the run-up of this law being passed.
Chez Fidelity, on sait que tout le monde a des objectifs financiers. Et ils sont tous différents. Mais ce qu'on a en commun, on veut tous les atteindre plus tôt.
So what you're seeing here is a line to get into the Ukrainian consulate in Prague. So all of these people want to hurry up and get their services taken care of because they don't want to have to go back to the consulate for any reason at risk of being drafted. This is reportedly what the wait line looks like to get into the Ukrainian consulate in Warsaw.
Jeez. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad in Poland right now.
So think of how stressful this is for them. They're welcomed into Western countries. You know, they have all of this press. They're treated well. But now those same countries won't protect them from Zelensky's war, and they'll be sent back to leave their families and go to a war that could end today if Zelensky wanted it to. And are we going to help them now? Now that 2 years after we congratulated ourselves in the West for doing that? Apparently we're not. Our government is A-okay with these new draconian draft rules and then dying. We just want to send their government more money so that these men can go to their death. Here's one more awful change to this law. It removes the concept of partially fit for military service. So they can be drafting people with disabilities. They can be drafting people with one limb. Off you go. And if you were already declared unfit to serve by a medical exam, you're going to have to resubmit to that exam again. They say they've opened 10 new conscription offices so that they can re-examine anyone. So even if you thought, no, I'm safe, I have a medical exemption because I have a disease, I'm missing a limb, for whatever reason,
not so fast. We're gonna have to get that again. Now, we will see more things like this. Sputnik News reporter Osi Kozak had posted videos online of Ukrainian soldier fighting with Down syndrome, and he was really abused in this video. I'm choosing not to show it to you because of the setting. It's not a video. I just still. You can seek this out if you want, but this is within the realm of possibility now. Again, at least 10 new military recruitment offices were opened to catch these guys. So inevitably, we will see more videos like this one of a man being pulled off public transportation in Odessa earlier this year.
Can you imagine that you're on your way to work, you're on your way trying to earn a living, you leave the house, there's so many reports of these young men leaving the house to go to work or just to go to the grocery store to get food for their family. And
I mean, that's what protecting democracy looks like.
Our freedom, but not theirs. Yeah. None of this makes sense because Zelensky never makes sense. He said in January to a German, right? He said to a German broadcaster that they had almost 1 million troops and they were doing just fine. This was in January, a quote from Zelensky to German media. He says, besides, we have a workforce of about 30 million people, even though I can't provide the exact number. There's some 6.5 to 7.5 million people have lived abroad. And again, I can't give you the accurate figure. So he said, we have almost 1 million troops and I have this 30 million to pull from. So I'm good. Well, I guess that's exactly what he's doing. Also, I wonder how he got that extra 200,000 people because in February, before the conflict broke out, they said they only had 260,000. And in December, they said they had 600,000. So even though we know they're dying at a rapid rate, somehow they're growing. I don't know if it's maybe that what the Star Wars army, the Clone Wars, right. Something like that. That's the only way these numbers make sense, or he's talking out of his ass. Those are the only two options.
We know what he's talking about. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. The only silver lining here is that the new law does not seem to include forced conscription of women yet. Because we've been following this and we warned you that Ukrainian officials were warning that they thought that they would have to do this. Here's a video from earlier this year, from several months ago. Ukrainian Army Lieutenant Colonel Nikolov said that they would need total mobilization of the entire male and female population from the age of 18, even so far as forcing prisoners into the army, as if that would be the only way that Ukraine could win.
После того, как не проиграют, необходимо не просто перепомнить, необходимо достаточно. Как я это вижу, это тотальная мобилизация всех, чего может появляться в конце 18 лет. Не обязательно это должна быть передовая, там может быть оборонная, если предприятие, это может быть цель, может какую-то другую отдел, чтобы определить, это нас, необходимо привлечь заключенных для выполнения своей жизни. Идет война 10 лет, неужели не научились делать измены
Okay, so said that's against the law. He's like, well, you've been at war for 10 years, if you change the law, that's exactly what you do.
Does the documents define what a woman is over there? Do they know what that is over there?
Good point, because we have seen those spoof videos where Ukrainian men dress as women to avoid conscription. That's a joke so far. Again,
kind of an aside, but am I the only one who noticed that guy's sweatshirt? I want to say it reminds me of
because we have a publishing network.
Oh.
Douglas Engine API. So it looked like it looked like they had like I couldn't quite see it because it looked like it had
Yeah.
Just an aside, that's what's going on here. But
Yeah, that guy rhymes with Yahtzee. He liked that game, the dice game. I rhyme like Yahtzee. You're right. And when he was talking about the 10 years that Ukraine, he said this year's war has been going on for 10 years. Well, those Yahtzee players are the ones who've been waging that war for 10 years. That's a good observation. So I ask you, who will speak to the Ukrainians in this dragnet of a war? Who will tell them that their lives will not move back this line? Every time we talk about this, I think it's important to revisit the map. So here is the map. On June 1st, 2023, when we were told the counteroffensive started, they threw many lives at this red line in order to move it back to white to become Ukraine, even though the people in those regions voted and asked to become Russia because they were tired of being bombed and terrorized by Ukraine. This is a map of the war as of yesterday. It did not move. Ukraine has made no progress to regain that territory, nor should they. Again, Ukraine has been bombing those regions since 2014. The media wants us to pretend that we never knew that, but there's lots of reporting from 2014. If we care to go back and look, here's a report that covers it from Sputnik News if you'd like to go over it, but a lot of Western sources have it too. So given that those regions asked Russia to help the terror to stop, and those regions voted to join Russia, Ukraine must stop sending men to their death to take that territory back. These men must be allowed to live out their lives in peace because, one, they don't deserve it. Ukraine didn't treat those people in the Donbass well, and they only want that land back because it's rich in uranium and other natural resources. And two, they won't succeed, no matter how many men they throw at that line. So, with all of that, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson said, oh no, we're still going to continue to support Ukraine with military aid. He's about to put a bill up for vote in Congress. The number was originally supposed to be $60 billion, but now he's saying he needs $95 billion in order to send aid to Ukraine, but that also includes aid for Israel. He says he needs to do that because he considers himself a wartime speaker. We talked about this earlier, but here's how he is presenting it. Ukraine needs the money, and I'm a leader of a war.
Look, we're in unprecedented times. Okay, we're in dangerous times. This has been articulated here, around the world, and here at home. We need steady leadership. We need steady hands at the wheel. Look, I regard myself as a wartime speaker. I mean, in a literal sense, we are. I knew that when I took the gavel. I didn't anticipate that this would be an easy path. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich posted a couple days ago on his social media that this is the hardest challenge that's faced a speaker probably in the history of the country, the moment we're in right now. He said, arguably, maybe comparable to the Civil War, but maybe worse.
Okay. The extreme irony is that he won't, if he thinks he's a wartime speaker, he should put these wars up for a vote to Congress. We should get a vote then. Don't call yourself a wartime speaker and keep sneaking wars in, sliding them, putting them under your plate like your broccoli. That's wrong. So it kills me that he said that, and they insult us by not voting for war, because at least then we could see them doing this out in plain sight. But he's not a wartime speaker because he refuses to put these for a vote. So that makes me bonkers. Do you join me in that sentiment? How do you feel? Let us know in the chat.
I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. You know, YouTube thinks that you'll actually